Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Doug Estes, then 33, went out that afternoon with his stepson and a buddy on November 17, 1990, a Saturday and the second day of firearms deer hunting season. The bodies were found by Estes' stepson. The ideal day for a hunt was November 17, 1990, but before they could catch a game, Jim Bennett and Doug Estes' lives were cruelly taken in Kalamazoo County, starting a domino effect that would last for more than 30 years. There were 2 hunters who were suspected and 2 hunters who were killed. A concealed clue that held the secret to solving the mystery was latent amid the enigma. What was the hint that prevented its discovery earlier? Why did it take the investigators so long to find out the truth? The way of life in Kalamazoo County, Michigan, throughout the thriving 1990s, was characterized by a strong work ethic, solid interpersonal ties, and a common dedication to advancement. There were 223 of 411 people living in Kalamazoo County, Michigan. A diverse range of people with varying goals were present, with one crime defining its history. The 1990s unfurled as a transformational decade against the backdrop of this dynamic county. On November 17, 1990, a relatively warm day in Kalamazoo County, the fatal day occurred. The hunters were headed to the Fulton State Game Area in hopes of catching a good game. Bobby Brown and Doug Estes, his stepfather, were among them. The group believed that splitting apart was a smart move and went in different directions. In order to identify the deer's movement, Doug, Bobby, and the others were intent on listening for even the smallest noises. Due to the fact that winter days were usually peaceful, the group and the locals were alerted a few minutes later by the sound of 2 gunshots. Just down the street from her home, Helen Knopfs and her son heard a car scream into a ditch. Could this have something to do with the recent gunfire, or was it just a coincidence? The fact that gunshots were common in the vicinity did not change the fact that the timing and closeness could not have been coincidental. Knopfs and her son were inquisitive and worried as they walked up to the automobile and noticed a sweaty man behind the steering wheel. His expression was unpleasant, and he appeared anxious. She offered to call a tow truck for him, because Knopfs believed he needed assistance, but he declined, claiming that a deer had unexpectedly crossed the road and left him in the ditch. There was something wrong, even though the justifications appeared sincere. After all, people used to come here and hunt deer. Knopfs believed he was being calm, which was strange, yet he seemed eager to go out. The man in the automobile wasn't even looking for assistance when she offered to call the cops. He said he didn't want to involve the police because he was sure someone else would fix his car, and then he drove off. However, the gunfire echoes were still audible. Since the sound originated from the direction he traveled, Bobby Brown assumed that his stepfather had captured the deer. He continued in the same direction, almost eager to congratulate him, and discovered Doug lying on his back in a pool of blood on the ground. It was such a strange sight that Bobby's initial reaction was whether Doug was pulling a practical joke. There had been 2 gunshots, but he could not believe what he was seeing as reality set in. Doug might have been shot twice as a result, but he was only wounded by 1 gunshot. The alternative was that someone actually attempted to kill him by firing 2 shots at once and missed one. However, while Bobby searched the area in a panic, he saw something else that was unbelievable. Another body was lying face down. He hurried over to the other man's corpse and rolled him over, but he was obviously dead. He had first checked for Doug's pulse, but there was no hope. Bobby was powerless to help. He promptly alerted the police and raced out to seek assistance. The police responded quickly to examine the disturbing events that transpired on that fatal day, setting the stage for a thorough inquiry. Bobby had previously told the officers about the 2 bodies, and they confirmed their presence. Their first task was to identify the victims, and before long, the police were able to identify them. Bobby had already identified his stepfather Doug, as he had phoned the police, and the other man was Jim Bennett, a nature enthusiast who was hunting alone that day. Jim Bennett and Doug Estes were both struck in the back with their hunting licenses at close range. The males had been shot with separate guns, which was strange. According to one version, they shot each other because they thought they were the deer they were searching for. The first problem was that they were nearly impossible to strike because they had both been shot in the back. When ballistic testing revealed that Doug's gun was missing from the scene and Jim's muzzle loader was fully loaded, the second discrepancy emerged. However, that was just the beginning of the chaos. Detective Bruce Wiersma, who was now retired, and Sergeant Roy Ballett were given the case. Since the area had not seen murder cases in a long time, Wiersma was overwhelmed by it because he lacked experience in homicide cases, much less double homicide. But Wiersma made the decision to pay close attention to the specifics in order to guarantee correct protocol. As the investigation went forward, they discovered that Jim and Doug had never met before. It was just a coincidence that they were both slain at the same moment, because they had gone hunting separately. Already, the detectives had no idea what might have been the reason behind the murder. It was more difficult to comprehend the case given since there was no relationship between the victims, although, if they had been acquaintances, a mutual friend may have been found. However, there was still optimism, since they began to suspect Bobby Brown, one of the victim's stepson. At first, the detectives thought that Jim was the target, which is why the killings took place. They claimed that Bobby had intended to rob him, but the heist failed, and Doug was also killed in the process. Bobby had to call the police because his plan did not succeed, the police suspected. However, Bobby's intents and motives did not align with the crime, and Estes and Bennett's families felt that their loved one was not the primary target. The detective's suspicion radar was always on, regardless of what the families stated, in case they overlooked any evidence. In order to find out if the neighbors had heard or seen anything odd that day, the police proceeded to check the crime scene once more. The neighbors had indeed heard the gunshots, but Helen Knopf's statement added a fresh perspective to the tale. She assisted the officers in drawing a composite of the man whose vehicle went into the ditch. The detectives spoke with other neighbors because, although the mystery man was starting to be suspected, there was no evidence connecting him to the crime. Following extensive discussion and exploration of their narratives, a new name surfaced from the obscurity. Jeff Titus, who was born in 1952, owned the land directly behind the Fulton State Game Area, where it served as a boundary. Prior to joining President Richard Nixon's security detail, he was a police officer in the U.S. Marine Corps. He then got a job at a VA medical center as a security guard. He loved hunting and being outside in addition to his professional activities, but he was fiercely protective of his land. When hunters would wander into his lands, he would become enraged. Could Doug and Jim have crossed the boundary into Titus's territory and enraged him? The cops wanted to know where Titus was when the murder occurred. That same day, the investigators brought him in for questioning in the evening when he was free. It turns out that Jeff Titus was himself hunting deer. He had gone off with a friend to an elderly couple's home at Battle Creek, which is over 27 miles from the Fulton Game State area. Titus and his friend went to Burger King and then drove back home after a few hours. The narrative began to diverge at that point. It had finally been discovered that Doug Estes's lost rifle was fully loaded. Titus was involved. He claimed that after finding it some 30 yards from the scene of the crime, he decided to keep it clean so that no one could claim it and it could not be linked to another person. The revelation demonstrated that Doug and Jim had not killed each other and that someone else was to blame for their deaths, even though it threatened to seriously implicate Titus. Although it undoubtedly sparked concerns, Titus was cleared since there was no way to verify whether his tale was false. More importantly, he had a strong alibi. However, the investigators were aware that something was amiss. Despite their best efforts, the situation seemed to get more complicated. The investigation ultimately became cold in 2000 since there were no new leads or closures. A fresh team of detectives, led by Detective Mike Brown and now retired Sergeant Mike Workema, took over the case files and reopened the double homicide case of Doug and Jim. Re-examining the neighbors, re-examining the clues, and re-evaluating the previous suspects were the first steps in their investigation. It turned out that Bobby Brown was the object of their initial suspicion. He was cleared after much back and forth. Who had slain those men that day? Then, if the primary suspect was exonerated and there were no leads or clues. In retrospect, that would seem like a straightforward response, but the cold case investigators took their time and ultimately concluded that Jeff Titus had to be the murderer, regardless of what the original cops thought. Since the incident had occurred more than 10 years ago, people's recollections were hazy and their accounts varied. It was turning out to be harder than they thought. But the investigator quickly developed a tenable theory. It implied that Titus had left the hunting property where he had been at the time of the murders on November 17, 1990, and gone back to his own adjacent property close to the Fulton State game area. He took this move because he believed that someone might have entered his property without permission. Following that, it was thought that he killed the victims before returning to the Battle Creek farm and going home with his friend. Titus, a father and married man, was arrested in 2001 after his co-workers at the Veterans Affairs facility made reports. During the deer hunting season, they both revealed that Titus did not appreciate trespassing hunters. It was a good enough motivation, the cops said. Additionally, his colleagues claimed that he boasted and talked openly about the murders. The now retired Assistant Prosecutor Scott Brower of Kalamazoo County presided over Jeff Titus's trial in 2002. Unfortunately, Titus's alibi witnesses had become weaker with time and were no longer able to testify in his favor. The original investigators who had completely exonerated Titus of any crime were not called to testify during the trial, and his neighbor Helen Knopfs did not appear on the witness stand regarding the mysterious man in his car. Titus was found guilty and given 2 life sentences without the chance of release. Even though the prosecutors did not dispute the veracity of his alibi, he was imprisoned in Coldwater, Michigan, at the Lakeland Correctional Facility. However, this tale was far from over. Howard Swabash, a recently retired polygraph examiner from the Michigan State Police, was a noteworthy addition to the team during Titus's legal defense, which was led by attorney William Fett. It turned out that Fett had hired Swabash as a private investigator. According to court documents, Swabash's wife filed for divorce in January 2002, just 5 weeks after Titus was accused of murder. Even though the identity of the second woman involved was kept secret, the accusations of marital adultery led to the dissolution of their marriage. 3 months after Titus was found guilty by a jury, on the memorable Halloween day of October 31, 2002, his wife Julie visited him at Saginaw Prison with their daughter and private investigator Swabash. Since they had not gotten along for years, Julie told Titus that she planned to file for divorce. According to the public records, Swabash and Titus's ex-wife Julie eventually got married in Florida in April 2005, just 3 years after Titus was found guilty. This was a startling development that sparked speculation about their relationship and how it might have affected the case. The first inquiry that resulted in Titus's exoneration in 1990 was greatly aided by retired Sergeant Roy Belay of the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Office. Shortly after Titus's conviction, Belay confronted Swabash, the investigator in the Kalamazoo County Courthouse, feeling confused and unhappy with the way things had gone. Belay was disappointed, asking why Swabash had not even bothered to get in touch with him to share his thoughts and feelings about the matter, especially if he had assumed the responsibility of conducting the investigation to prove Titus's innocence. Belay and the other initial detective would have given important testimony on Titus's alibi, but the defense did not call them as witnesses. The altercation became heated, and Swabash's response was combative and offensive. He left quickly, leaving Belay to think over the experience. During a phone interview from prison, Titus freely questioned if the private investigator for this defense team had been genuinely interested in his interests. Titus maintained his innocence throughout the entire incident, saying, "It's a shocker, and then I wonder, was he working for me? Was he working for an ulterior motive? I don't know." But when Bruce Wiersma and Roy Belay, the 2 detectives who worked on the original inquiry, publicly said that they were willing to testify in favor of Titus's alibi, it was a turning point. The University of Michigan's Innocence Clinic became interested in this development and became involved in the case. At the same time, an independent inquiry was launched by the Michigan Attorney General's office. As both organizations examined the evidence, an important discovery was made. A key aspect that had not been revealed to Titus's defense team during the initial trial was that they discovered that there were many hunter deaths in the area and that it appeared to be the work of a serial murderer. Without a doubt, it cast suspicion on any possible link between Titus and Doug and Jim's untimely deaths in 2002. The Innocence Clinic filed a motion for relief of judgment and a new trial on Titus's behalf as a result of these findings and other strong evidence. The genuine turning point, however, occurred in 2019, when 47-year-old producer Jacinda Davis, who is well known for her work in the true crime genre, happened upon her most compelling narrative while traveling the highways to find ideas for her next series. The murderer's journey took her to the center of Michigan, where she was enticed by Jack White's renowned Third Man Records. She came over the intriguing case of Jeff Titus while browsing the internet. Susan Simpson, a 34-year-old former lawyer who is now a podcaster, shared a trip with Davis. Simpson, Rabia Chaudhry, and Colin Miller were the hosts of the popular podcast Undisclosed. After meeting, discussing, and finally deciding to work together, Davis and Simpson decided to combine their narrative skills to help solve the mysterious Titus case. On October 26, 2020, Simpson's podcast Undisclosed was set to debut its upcoming season. The audience was able to uncover some previously unknown facts and delve further into the complex issues of the contentious conviction after it was broadcast. At the same time, on November 1, 2020, fans watched the premiere of the gripping 2-hour documentary Killer in Question, which was broadcast on Investigation Discovery. During their investigation for the series and podcast, Davis and Simpson discovered that there was a problem with the story. The original detectives in this case absolutely 100% clear Jeff Titus and believe he is not guilty, and the cold case team is the opposite. They believe beyond a doubt that they have the right man. During their lengthy investigation, they discovered a significant breakthrough involving 2 key witnesses who had seen a car stuck in a ditch immediately after the gunshots, Davis said. I can't think of another case where there are 2 sets of detectives that don't agree. Further issues were raised by the fact that Titus's neighbor, Helen Knopfs, could have readily identified him if he had been in the car. When they discovered that the driver was not him, they began to question the stranger's motivations and the reason behind his hasty departure from the scene. Was he the elusive killer they were looking for? They were shocked to see that the composite sketch created using Knopf's testimony bore a striking resemblance to Ohio serial killer Thomas Dillon. Dillon has previously targeted outdoor enthusiasts, hunters, and fishermen. When he was finally caught in 1993 for killing other hunters, Knopfs herself had even recognized him from a police lineup, according to FBI reports. Both Simpson and Davis were full of optimism that their accounts might inspire others who might have important information about the Estes and Bennett killings to come forward. Simpson noted that the simple act of sharing these stories frequently has a cascading effect, encouraging people to come forward with insightful information that may be added to the ongoing investigation. Davis agreed with them. She admitted that memories might evolve with time, with little information occasionally disappearing. Original memories, however, usually survive on their own. Both investigators had their own judgments about Titus's guilt as they dug more into the case. After initially being dissatisfied by the evidence, Simpson found strong corroborations that supported the original investigators' conclusions. Simply put, the evidence against Jeff Titus was insufficient. The Michigan State Attorney General's Office's Conviction Integrity Unit has been thoroughly reviewing Titus's case since 2019. Since none of the motions filed by the Innocence Clinic had been approved throughout the ongoing inquiry into this potential erroneous conviction, Jeff Titus was forced to serve 2 life sentences at the Lakeland Correctional Facility in Coldwater Branch County, Michigan. Despite the challenges, the Innocence Clinic worked to get Titus released from the facility in 2021 because of the COVID-19 outbreak, which resulted in several of the Lakeland inmates testing positive for the virus. They requested a bond release under extraordinary circumstances. Regretfully, the district judge who administered their plea thought it was unjustified. The podcasters Davis and Simpson were the first detectives to discover a possible connection between Dillon, the serial killer, and the 1990 killings. Their natural curiosity brought them to Dillon's troubled history, since he had admitted to the gruesome 1993 killings of 5 hunters and outdoor enthusiasts. Dillon also told his cellmate that he was a main suspect in another murder in Pennsylvania, and that he was involved in the murders of 2 hunters in a county that he thought the police would never connect him to. Dillon's involvement in the investigation provided a strong lead, even though he passed away in prison on October 21, 2011. Motivated by their resolve, David Morin, director of the Michigan Innocence Clinic, set out on a mission and traveled to the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Office. Morin spent a long 6 hours carefully going through the file room's archives. As each document was analyzed, the pieces of the puzzle started to fit together, revealing a potentially important development in the inquiry. Deep within the repository, Moran discovered a unique folder as he persisted in his quest for the truth. There were perhaps 30 interesting pages in the thin folder. It was gently penciled with the words "serial killer" on the outside. Moran grew increasingly certain as he perused the pages that these records held important details about Dylan and might hold the secret to their case's resolution. The knowledge that these crucial documents had never been given to the defense added yet another level of surprise. There was an uncomfortable void in the information provided throughout the trial, since it seemed that the prosecutor's office was still unaware of their existence. This revelation gave Moran optimism and strengthened his conviction that their fight for justice was headed towards success. Bruce Worsema, the original detective who put together the serial killer file, stated that he was convinced Dylan was the criminal responsible for the crimes and that the reports on Dylan were part of the case file. The retired cold case sergeant Mike Worsema, however, claimed he had never seen that specific file. He denied knowing about the alternate suspect, as did other detectives on the cold case squad. But according to a police report that turned up in court records, the file was known to at least one of the cold case detectives. Former Kalamazoo County Associate Prosecutor Stuart Fenton had a different viewpoint. He stated that he thought Titus was behind the killings. He was adamant that an innocent man had not been wrongly condemned and that the jury had made the right choice. Fenton believed that the new material would not likely have changed the first trial's outcome in light of the subsequent claims. Titus personally promised himself that he would not cut his beard until the day he was released from prison. On February 16, 2023, he finally received the long-awaited call telling him of his imminent release, and he was overcome with emotion. Titus recounted, "I just started bawling." He would frequently cry with happiness again when he started working on the cards, briefly covering his face with his hands. Jeff Getting, the Kalamazoo County prosecutor, stated that it is still unclear whether additional charges will be brought. He continued, "We're in the process of reviewing the case. It is a complicated factual and legal analysis that will take some time to process." After serving more than 20 years in jail for the 1990 murder case involving Doug Estes and Jim Bennett, 71-year-old Jeff Titus was released on February 24, 2023. His conviction was reversed. It should never have happened in the first place, according to Titus, who added that people had been waiting for this day for 22 years. The moment of being released from jail produced a wave of feelings that Titus found difficult to express. "I'm just ecstatic and overjoyed to finally be out where I can get out and do something. I want to see my grandkids. I haven't seen them. I want to see them." A supporting group of people who had been instrumental in his battle for justice greeted him as he entered the free world. Attorney Moran supported Titus during his newfound freedom, as did the sons of the late Detective Roy Ballet, investigative podcasters Jacinda Davis and Susan Simpson, and committed students from the Michigan Innocence Clinic. Although Detective Ballet, a steadfast supporter of Titus's innocence, had died in January 2022, his influence endured. Worsema, the cold case investigator, was still certain of Titus's culpability, even though he supported the judge's decision to free Titus from jail due to Dylan's ignorance. "I still believe Jeff Titus is the killer," Worsema declared. "Considering his character and the actions he took, I believe he is the perpetrator. He is a dangerous individual, and I have apprehensions about him. I hope that now that he has gained his freedom, he will use it responsibly and make the right choices." Titus used his newfound freedom to do things that he had not been able to do for 20 years. Enjoying the meals he had long missed while away, he rediscovered the pleasures of life and immersed himself in the presence of loved ones. He even obtained his driver's license and liked spending time with his grandsons whom he had never met before. He remarked, "I can't express enough how grateful I am to be free and have the freedom to simply live again." Titus continued to create and sketch greeting cards, and he enjoyed feeding songbirds and deer. Jeff Titus ultimately received justice after nearly 20 years, but the cases of Doug Estes and Jim Bennett remained unsolved until the passing of serial killer Thomas Dylan. Was the serial killer responsible for the crime, in your opinion, or was Titus? Who, in your opinion, erred during the investigation? The cold case team or the original investigators? And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Have you ever wondered how often people are forced to do terrible things out of love? In most cases, completely innocent people who have no idea they have become victims and such stories suffer. The story begins with the protagonist, a lovely girl named Kendra Hatcher, who, without realizing it, becomes a victim in a love triangle. How did it all start? Who is Kendra Hatcher? We'll find out today. It occurred from September to 2015. On Wednesday, Kendra Hatcher, 35, drove into the parking garage of a Gales Park 17 home. She lived in a house where everyone, including Kendra, felt completely safe because there was a 24-hour concierge on duty. And it was a lively and luxurious apartment building with a saltwater pool, a fitness studio, and a gourmet coffee bar in the uptown neighborhood of Dallas, Texas, USA. But let's go through everything in order. Kendra Hatcher, 35, a pediatric dentist from Springfield, Illinois, was born on February 3, 1980. She came from a good family that could afford many things for her, including a good education, a good university, and a job. She grew up in Pleasant Plains, Illinois, and attended dental school before moving to Dallas for work. She had recently taken a job at Smile Zone. It seemed like an ideal fit for her during her spare time. Kendra led Bible study classes, and not just any Bible study classes, and not just any Bible study. She was a devout Christian who wanted to use her dental skills to benefit others. She took part in volunteer programs such as building churches overseas and providing free dental care to children in Ecuador. Kendra's professional and personal lives were both very active. On May 24, 2015, she started dating a doctor named Ricky Paniagua. Ricky was finishing his dermatology residency at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. Kendra and Ricky met on the dating app Tinder and had their first date on May 24. They were inseparable from the very first date. They shared similar values and desired the same things in life. Although their relationship had only lasted a few months, they were already discussing the possibility of marriage. Unfortunately, Kendra had no idea what lay ahead. Kendra drove into the parking garage to park her car after work one evening in September. She arrived at 7:42 p.m. She did this every day, but she was looking forward to the upcoming weekend because she had planned to spend Labor Day in Mexico with Ricky, but Kendra was not going to make it there. A few minutes later, she pulled into the parking lot. Two men walking nearby overheard screams and gunshots. After the shots were fired, a Jeep Cherokee pulled out of the parking garage. Hashim said, who lives in the apartment complex, overheard the screams and called 911. The police arrived and discovered Kendra's body in the garage. She'd been shot. It was initially thought to be a robbery. Kendra's expensive purse went missing. Bullet fragments and a gun magazine were discovered on the ground near her body. However, after further investigation and examination of the scene, police determined that the manner of the shooting did not indicate a robbery. Rather, it resembled a shooting. The gunshot residue discovered indicated that Kendra's hands were up and behind her head at the time of the shooting. The entry point was at the top of her head, and the bullet exited through the chin. But who could have intended to kill Kendra as a result of the shooting? Everyone was in deep despair. How could this have occurred? She had never disagreed with anyone. Everyone had no idea what could have happened. There were numerous questions, but no answers yet. The police started their investigation. Police recovered surveillance footage from Gales Park 17. The video shows a Jeep Grand Cherokee driving into the parking lot at 7:15 p.m. At 7:42 p.m., Kendra returns home and pulls into the same garage. The footage shows a man walking to Kendra Scott, R., and then returning to the Jeep. Police believe this is the man who shot Kendra. The video showed that there was another person involved. The driver of the Jeep was a woman, and she drove out of the parking lot as soon as the man returned to the Jeep, but they could not be identified. So police released images of the Jeep and its driver to the media and asked the public for assistance. The appeal worked. Police were contacted by a man named Jose Luis Ortiz, who claimed ownership of the Jeep but was not involved in the shooting or driving at the time. Jose stated that on September morning, two of his friends, Brenda Delgado and Crystal Cortez, approached him and asked to borrow his Jeep. They explained that Crystal was having car problems, so they left the car at Jose's house for him to fix, and he loaned them his Jeep. They were supposed to return the Jeep to him that evening after work. Instead, Brenda requested that he meet her at Chili's that evening, and he agreed that Crystal was not at the restaurant, nor was his Jeep. Jose told police that he was at the restaurant with Brenda when the shooting occurred. Later that evening, the Jeep was returned to Jose's residence. Jose didn't expect his Jeep to be used as a getaway vehicle. He said he became aware of it when he saw the police address and recognized his Jeep. When he asked Brenda about it, she said it wasn't his Jeep. But Crystal used it to get dangerous substances for someone, and something went wrong. Jose told the police that Brenda convinced him not to say anything because it was his Jeep, and he could get in trouble with the cops, jeopardizing his citizenship. It appeared to him that she was attempting to manipulate him. According to Jose, Brenda offered to pay to have his Jeep repainted a different color. After speaking with Brenda, Jose called the police. The police officers approached Brenda and asked if she knew who Kendra was. Brenda said she had no idea who Kendra was and had never seen her. At 7:42 p.m. on September 2, the police asked where she was, and Brenda said she was at Chili's with Jose, showing them the dinner receipts. Nonetheless, the police realized Brenda was involved in the crime. The first suspect in the case stepped forward. The cops questioned her about Jose's Jeep. Brenda said she gave Crystal the Jeep. When the police questioned Crystal, another suspect came forward. Crystal turned out to be a 23-year-old single mother. They asked if she was the woman on videotape driving the Jeep. She confirmed her identity and explained that an armed carjacker forced her to drive to the parking lot that evening. She stated that her 9-year-old son was with her, but the videotape shows that the child was not in the car. When the police informed her of this, she altered her story. She claimed there was no carjacking and that she voluntarily drove the man to the garage, but she assumed it was only for the robbery. She insisted that she knew nothing about the shooting. The police officers questioned her about why she had agreed to drive there, even though she suspected it was a robbery, and she admitted that Brenda had asked her to do so. The cops asked her what Brenda wanted from Kendra, which revealed new information. Kendra was dating Brenda's ex-boyfriend. It is about Ricky. Brenda and Ricky had dated from 2012 to early 2015. When they broke up, he began dating Kendra, which upset Brenda. However, Ricky was unaware of her unhappiness. In February 2015, he ended the relationship and began dating other women. When he met Kendra in May, he realized things were serious, and as a courtesy, he sent Brenda an email informing her that he was in a serious relationship. He didn't tell her Kendra's name, and Brenda seemed fine with it, saying she hoped to stay on good terms with Ricky as the interrogations continued and evidence piled up. Crystal sought a plea bargain and agreed to testify in exchange for a lesser sentence. She told the police that Brenda wanted to kill Kendra and that the murder was her idea. Crystal claims that within 2 weeks of meeting Brenda, they began planning to kill Kendra. Brenda was not simply upset that her relationship with Ricky had ended. According to the police, she was obsessed with him and desperately wanted him back. She pretended to Ricky that she was content with their friendship, but her life began to unravel. She was ready to hit rock bottom, so she began missing work. Brenda decided to make it her full-time job to bring Ricky back. She stalked Kendra and Ricky on social media, hacking Ricky's email and discovering their plans and travel arrangements. She started to hate Kendra even more. She believed Kendra had taken her place. In other words, she determined to get rid of Kendra Hatcher. Brenda asked Crystal if she knew of anyone who could help, and Crystal agreed to assist. They started devising a plan to kill Kendra. They met multiple times and devised various plans. Initially, they intended to inject Kendra with an illegal substance or sedative before discussing shooting her. Brenda asked Crystal if she could find someone to do it or if she knew anyone, as she was from a low-income neighborhood. They drove around the neighborhood asking people if they could help. Later, they met Christopher Love. He agreed to assist, and they started talking about different ways to kill Kendra. They decided that shooting her would be the most effective way to kill her because it was quick. Crystal told the cops that Brenda had agreed to give her $500, and she agreed to give Christopher both the money and the illegal substances. Crystal told police that they decided to kill Kendra on September 2 because they knew she and Ricky had plans for Labor Day weekend and would leave Dallas for a vacation in Mexico on September 3. Brenda felt they should have finished it sooner. Brenda was aware of all their plans and activities after learning that they intended to relocate to San Francisco upon their return. Brenda told Crystal that because she had downloaded Ricky's iPhone account to another phone and used it for snooping, she wanted the murder to appear to be a botched robbery. to determine where to commit the murder. Brenda and Crystal decided to follow Kendra to see how she got around on her typical day. They followed her to work. They sat outside the Salvation Army store and used binoculars to observe her movements while she was working. Brenda didn't realize Ricky's obsession with her head had turned her into a terrifying person, and Crystal didn't discourage her friend, instead assisting her for money. After work, they followed her and discovered the best way to get into the parking lot. They realized they could easily get in by parking in the visitor spot first and then following another car into the garage. They followed the same procedure for several days to ensure that nothing changed. They were confident that they knew exactly what Kendra would be doing from September 1 to the day before. Brenda, Crystal, and Christopher completed one last check and clocked in. They took gloves, syringes, disinfectant spray, and wipes from Kendra's workstation. The murder was planned to be committed by Crystal and Christopher alone the following day, September 2. Brenda and Crystal picked up the Jeep from Josie's early in the morning, before meeting Christopher at Jack in the Box. Brenda was dropped off at the Carrollton Library, while Crystal and Christopher went to Kendra's apartment complex alone. They waited across the street for about 30 minutes before driving to Kendra's place of employment. Crystal left to get her son and nephew from school and dropped them off at her grandmother's house. She drove back to Kendra's workplace and followed her as she left. They lost her in traffic, but returned first, so they pulled into the garage and waited for her there. When Kendra arrived, Christopher got out of the car. He was wearing gloves, approached Kendra with a gun, and shot her as she exited the car. Crystal stated that she heard the shot rather than seeing it. They left and Crystal collected her son after dropping Christopher off at home. Later, she met Brenda at Josie's house, where she returned his Jeep. Under the terms of the agreement, Crystal Maid would be the prosecution's star witness. There'd be 2 trials. Christopher and Brenda were charged with capital murder and tried independently. Crystal received a 35-year prison sentence in exchange for her testimony and guilty plea to murder charges. The police discovered a gun in the side compartment of Christopher's car. The gun had been used to shoot Kendra. Because of this, Christopher was prepared to speak. He told the police that Brenda had promised to pay him in illegal substances and money, and that she had hired him to shoot Kendra. Christopher was found guilty and sentenced to death. Brenda had been on the run for nearly 7 months before being brought to trial. She was even listed as one of the FBI's 10 most wanted people. She was arrested in April 2016. In Torreon, Coahuila, Mexico. Mexico agreed to extradite her on the condition that she not face the death penalty. When she was extradited back to the United States, she was officially charged with capital murder. Brenda's family and Ricky initially refused to believe she was involved in the crime. They recognized her as a loving woman of good character, with a good family and Christian values. Ricky told the police that they remained friends after their relationship with her ended. He even texted her the night Kendra was shot, letting her know she offered to help in any way she could. Brenda didn't plead guilty or not guilty, and her defense claimed she wasn't with Kendra at all and had an alibi and receipts proving she was at Chili's restaurant at the time of the crime. However, the prosecution claimed that Kendra was killed as part of a contract-killing scheme orchestrated by Brenda. Brenda did not have to be present during the shooting to be convicted of the crime, and she could still be found guilty because she planned and organized the entire event, and she hired Crystal and Christopher to commit the murder. Brenda's motive for wanting Kendra dead was revealed in court. She saw her as a hindrance to getting what she desired. She wanted to get back to Ricky. Brenda became increasingly obsessed with Kendra and Ricky in the months before her death, according to the court. Several people who knew Brenda testified in court about her obsession. Brenda's cousin, Moses Martinez, testified that she was depressed after ending her relationship with Ricky. He testified that she promised him a reward if he hit Kendra with a baseball bat. He refused to do so. Brenda's friend Jennifer Escobar testified that Brenda was obsessed with Ricky and was angry when he ended their relationship. She testified in court that Brenda read all of his emails and tracked his movements on her phone. She told the jury that Brenda kept a copy of his house key and had access to his bank accounts. Jennifer testified that Brenda asked her to eliminate Kendra Hatcher. She told the court that Brenda wanted her to either give her a lethal injection or hit her with a bat and leave her in a coma. Jennifer also confirmed to the court that Brenda offered her $2,000, a car, and illegal substances if she agreed to do it. Jennifer discussed the offer with her parents and then declined. The prosecution believes Brenda asked several people to assist her before finding one who agreed. They believe she used crystals to her advantage. Crystal was a single mother earning $11 per hour, and she admired Brenda, a woman with her own apartment and money, and aspired to be like her. The court learned that she gave Crystal $500, and police discovered an ATM withdrawal receipt in her belongings. She had also paid Christopher, who received the money, as well as $600 to $300 in illegal substances. Brenda was at Chili's restaurant the night Kendra was shot and left immediately. However, the jury was shown video footage from a surveillance camera installed at Josie's neighbor's house on the night of the murder. It also revealed that Brenda had gone to Josie's house after leaving Chili's. She was there with Crystal, and they exchanged their Jeep for a car. Cell phone data revealed that she was with Crystal and Christopher prior to the murder, and Brenda and Crystal communicated 99 times between August 22 and September. After only 30 minutes of deliberation, the jury found Brenda guilty. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Brenda was imprisoned and will not be released again. As a result, 5 people's lives were destroyed. First and foremost, Kendra, who had no idea Ricky would never get over it. Crystal, a single mother with a 9-year-old son, and Brenda's obsession have all had serious consequences. Unfortunately, a strong emotion like love can have such devastating consequences. It's times like these when you need to pause and let go. Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. We're going to go over another terrible instance with you today. Statistics show that the number of crimes perpetrated by young people has been rising globally. Violence among school children has increased recently, typically targeting their friends. As a result of these attacks, victims are frequently hospitalized, handicapped, or even killed. The main objective of such violent activities is typically to demonstrate their own dominance, authority, and tolerance. Furthermore, adolescent offenders have confidence in their impunity because many countries' laws are liberal. The nation was rocked by the tale of Agnes Marin, a French girl who was killed by a high school student. They attended a famous university with a stellar reputation, where it seemed impossible for anything like this to occur. The culprit had previously attacked the girls, as it turned out, but his affluent parents were able to conceal the truth about his exploits by securing their son's admission to a prestigious school in a different city. Adolescent anger is said to be a kind of protest during the time of self-discovery and personality development. However, in today's narrative, the boy's brutality sprang from a total lack of empathy, or the capacity to understand and feel the same emotions as others. He became the second teenager in French history to receive a life sentence because he was deemed to be incorrigible and a serious threat to society. Agnes Mara was who? The only child of Paula and Frederick Marin. Agnes Mara was born in Paris on November 26, 1999. The girl was raised in a rather prosperous household. Her parents wanted to give their child the finest because they loved her. I didn't know how to say no to Agnes from a young age. She was taken to the sea, dressed in name-brand boutiques, and purchased pricey toys and technology. Marin was a lively, outgoing, and restless youngster. She always had a large social circle and many interests. She had a creative streak, enjoyed movies and music, and hoped to work as a filmmaker. She did well in school, and her teachers recognized her high potential, but she was frequently hindered from achieving the best outcomes by her general inattention and laziness. Agnes joined a bad firm when she was 13, which had a detrimental effect on her conduct and academic performance. She began skipping school, consuming beer, and smoking cigarettes, not just conventional cigarettes. Her parents opposed harsh parenting methods and made multiple attempts to have a dialogue with their daughter, but were unsuccessful. When the girl was once again discovered smoking and drinking beer on school property, she lied about her vows to change her ways and stop interacting with unsavory people. The issue of her expulsion came up. Her parents understood that nothing would change if their daughter remained in Paris and continued to interact with negative influences. In order to escape the hustle and temptations of the capital, Frederick and Paula made the decision to move Agnes not merely to a different school, but also to a different city or even a province, a brand new school. The closed private college Sévignon, which is situated in the commune of Le Chambon-sur-Lignon, in the department of the Upper Loire area of Auvergne, was the choice made by Marin's parents after weighing their possibilities. With nearly a century of history, it is a distinguished educational institution. Established in the 1930 cc's, the institution operated on the boarding school model, where students resided in addition to studying. However, in a small town with a population of barely 2,500, the college was in severe financial trouble by the end of the 2000s and was in fact on the verge of going bankrupt. The local educational institution faced a dearth of students and consequently a shortage of funding as young people increasingly preferred to study in the capital or a major metropolis. In the past, admission to this college required both good character and a high grade point average. However, as there were multiple competitors for a single spot, even this did not ensure entrance. However, a significant student shortage in 2011 caused a significant shift in the scenario. The school, specifically not, declared total bankruptcy, drastically lowering the entrance requirements, particularly if they were the offspring of affluent parents who were prepared to serve as sponsors. Agnes had a strong academic record and grade point average, which helped her gain admission to 7 College despite her behavioral issues. The authorities chose to ignore her traits. The parents of Agnes were pleased. They thought their daughter would benefit from the change. She would grow more mature and be able to go through this challenging time of transition more readily. Marin was an outgoing, happy, and amiable girl. She managed to blend in with the new group. She made friends right away and felt at ease from the first few days. She also made good academic progress, particularly in new subjects that were unavailable at her former Parisian school. Every 2 or 3 weeks, her parents paid their daughter a visit at the boarding school. They were quite happy with her accomplishments and positive behavioral changes. During her studies, Agnes only made one visit home. Notably, the new school was situated on a sizable plot of land that was encircled by woodland. Since the crime rate in these areas was regarded as one of the lowest in the nation, there were no rigorous security measures or obvious border barriers. Students sometimes went there in groups after school because it only took a quarter of an hour to walk from the college to the town center of Le Chambon-sur-Lignon. However, everyone had to return by 5 o'clock in the evening. Discipline was applied for both rule violations and student disappearances. After class on November 16, 2011, Agnes and a few of her classmates made the decision to go for a walk in the town. She made a buddy there who attended a different school, but they kept in touch and contacted each other frequently. The two females trailed behind the general company when they made the decision to go shopping. Marin was not present when the youths returned to campus a few hours later. This situation did not initially raise any concern, and everyone was confident that she would return shortly. However, as time went on and darkness descended, the teachers became quite concerned about the student's absence. The school administration reported the event to the police without hesitation because she was nowhere to be seen on campus and her phone was off. Students, instructors, and law enforcement officers performed the search, which started that evening. They separated into groups and searched different areas, but they were unable to locate the missing girl. Everyone hoped she would return alive and unhurt, but no one had seen her and no one knew where she may be. Almost instantly, Marin's parents were informed and inquired as to whether their daughter had come home. After hearing the shocking news, Frederick and Paula hurried as quickly as they could to Le Chambon-sur-Lignon. They reassured them that Agnes could not have fled because she had nowhere to go and no incentive to do so. They said their daughter was really happy at her new school. Here, she had made lots of pals. She had no problems with anyone, and she didn't feel uncomfortable. The hunt was actively aided by the involvement of Agnes's mother and father. In an attempt to locate their daughter, they displayed images of her throughout the city, spoke with her friends, and looked for any leads or clues. What is the friend of Agnes concealing? The first thing the police did was search for those who may have known about Agnes's future plans and were the last to see her. According to the girls in her class, Marin went shopping with a buddy she made in the city. Although no one was able to provide her identity, Estelle, the same buddy from a different school, was soon located by law enforcement. Agnes had indeed been in contact with the girl for the last time. She was therefore seen as an extremely valuable witness. She did not, however, offer any helpful details. She said in the initial interview that Agnes had assisted her in selecting a birthday gift for her father. After saying their goodbyes, they each enjoyed a milkshake. Agnes had to go back to school, and Estelle went home. The girl's behavior seemed a little strange, but her narrative sounded reasonable. She appeared to be holding something back and was clearly nervous. When they made the decision to speak with her once more, the account she had previously recounted abruptly started to include some details that she wanted to keep private. Estelle admitted that Agnes had supposedly scheduled a meeting with a young man that day, but she had not disclosed his name to her. The boys were going to do something wicked, apparently using illegal substances, even though it wasn't intended to be a date. When Estelle tried to call Agnes a few hours later, she didn't pick up, and by the evening her phone was off. During the initial interview, the girl acknowledged lying, because she promised Marin that she wouldn't tell anyone about the encounter with the enigmatic man. But when word spread that Agnes had vanished, Estelle made the decision to come clean, since she thought this young man might be connected to the abrupt disappearance. Some have speculated that Agnes might have just fled from college. It's possible that the girl has fallen in love and is currently hanging out with her hidden beau. The day she vanished, her phone was the last one on campus, but it was switched off thereafter, making it impossible to find. However, all of the information about Agnes's calls and communications was readily available to police officers. At that point, the authorities initially identified 17-year-old Matthew Molanas, a high school student at the same institution as the missing Marin, as the primary suspect. What may have connected the missing woman to a 17-year-old young man? It turned out that she had been corresponding with Matthew Molanas for the past few days. What could they possibly have in common? Regardless, the youngster needed to be questioned since he might have important information that could help solve the crime. They were indeed scheduled to meet on campus and go on a walk together on the day of Agnes's disappearance, but there was nothing specific or concerning in their correspondence. Matthew said he would show her something, but he didn't say what. On November 17, Marin was initially asked to speak with the police. He was quite composed, but his hands and face had odd, seemingly new scrapes on them. The young man acknowledged, however, that he was experimenting with illegal substances, and yesterday he went overboard, losing consciousness and lying for several hours in a thorny bush. Teachers and fellow students attested to the fact that this student did have issues. In January 2011, Mathieu was accepted to Sivanal College, where his parents allegedly moved him to shield him from trouble and bad company. Even so, the young guy used alcohol and other illegal substances, which made his expulsion a possibility. Nevertheless, he felt sorry for him and was given time to change. Molanas appeared to be a normal, troubled adolescent rebel. His demeanor and appearance seemed to challenge people around him. He liked hot beverages, smoked, and dressed in gothic fashion on campus. He boasted to his peers about his pranks, saying he would not face consequences. Mathieu vanished for several hours on the day Agnes vanished. In the evening, he emerged from the woods wearing filthy clothes and with scratches on his hands and face. He responded to any inquiries by saying that he had consumed too much alcohol and had passed out on his own. Although everything about him seemed and sounded suspicious, the investigators chose to check into him more further because there was yet no concrete proof against him. The wealthy parents' pampered son, the eldest of 3 children born to Sophia and Dominique Molanas, Mathieu Molanas was born in December 1993 in the Garda municipality of Negi-Solorg. He was raised in a reasonably well-to-do household with his 2 younger sisters and was accustomed to having all of his wishes met right away. He was noticed acting strangely from a young age. The boy attempted to avoid being around other kids since he was a very hostile, irascible, and difficult to communicate with. The condition deteriorated during adolescence. Matthew experienced angry outbursts. He started drinking alcohol on a regular basis, tried with other illegal substances, and frequently caused fights. However, the young man's stunning features helped him gain popularity with the opposite sex, despite his aggressive and antisocial behavior. He had a girlfriend at the time of the events in his hometown, whom he visited on the weekends and whose parents were aware of. Matthew had several police records, including one for stealing prescription medications from a pharmacy with a companion. However, the matter was kept quiet, most likely because the teenager's parents paid for it. During interrogations, his father also volunteered to sponsor the school while it was in trouble, which allowed him to get into a prestigious private school despite having a low GPA and legal issues. Despite his stubborn and haughty demeanor, Molanas maintained his composure to the point where the authorities questioned whether he was involved in Agnes's disappearance. He never left his favorite toy, a yo-yo, in his hands, which he was twirling all the time. He first denied knowing Agnes during the initial interrogation, but after seeing a printout of their correspondence, he started to modify his evidence and attempt to make up a lie on the spot. But he soon found himself unsure of what he was saying. The man claims that he promised to show Agnes a mushroom-growing area in the forest. They allegedly utilized them in tandem. Following his illness, Mathieu collapsed under a prickly shrub, where he remained until dusk. He also saw that Marraine was gone when he woke up. Since it was growing late, he returned to the campus without searching for her. During all of the interrogations, a lawyer who had been retained by the Moulines's parents suggested that his young ward indicate the location where he had last seen Agnes and where they allegedly consumed mushroom. However, Mathieu claimed that he would not be able to locate that clearing because they had accidentally discovered it. He left the area on autopilot, without really comprehending his surroundings or where he was. However, specialists quickly disproved Mathieu's claims after discovering no evidence of mushroom consumption in his blood. Furthermore, it was determined that the wounds on his body were the result of a battle. That is, he was scratched with nails by someone who was presumably a girl, a gory finding in the thicket. The school children who had witnessed Mathieu emerge from the forest that night indicated the direction from which he had come, and it was determined to conduct a comprehensive, extensive search in that area of the forest. There was still a slim chance that Marraine would be found alive at that point. On November 18, however, searchers awaited the horrifying discovery of the missing Agnes's severely disfigured and partially burned remains in a tiny space tucked away in a thicket. Her clothing was ripped. There was no sign of her underwear. In addition to evidence of deep knife wounds, there were all the telltale symptoms of violence. Don't believe Moulins was responsible for this horrible crime. There was no question, but it was important to wait for the forensic specialist's conclusions and to get the killer to confess. The strangler admitted in Confessions of a Ruthless Killer that he purposefully lured Agnes into the woods to abuse her but allegedly had no plans to kill her. In fact, Mathieu did not particularly deny the horrific discovery when he was informed about it and started to testify, explaining how everything was. She, however, resisted vehemently. He had to use the rope from his favorite toy, the yo-yo, which he always carried with him, to tie up the victim after he scratched him. The man was upset about going to jail when Agnes yelled and threatened to turn him in to the police. He chose to kill the unlucky and dispose of the body since he did not want to. Agnes suffered 17 knife wounds, the majority of which were to the neck, face, and chest, after Mathieu viciously beat her, fracturing her arm, nose, multiple ribs, and shin. He doused the victim with a combustible concoction from a canister and lit her on fire when she ceased exhibiting any signs of life in the hopes that the flames would totally destroy the body. Then, as night fell, he hastily left, failing to see that the fire had been put out. He removed his toy from the corpse and carried it away. As though relishing each word and seeing the investigator's response, the high school girl described the incident calmly and in great detail. He had neither regret nor sympathy for the victim. The investigation revealed that Agnes had evidence of the rapist's biological fluid in her body and pieces of mature skin and epithelium beneath her fingernails. Additionally, traces of the victim's and the offender's perspiration were discovered on the rope of the actual toy yo-yo. Agnes's parents received her body following all required tests and medical evaluations, and they buried their only daughter in Paris. Notably, the burial for the first victim of a young psychopath was held on her birthday, November 26, 2011. The fact that Marraine was not the only victim of Moulines stunned law enforcement when they closely examined his biography, but this information was purposefully concealed. It turns out that since he was a young boy, he had been mean to other people, including his own sisters, other kids, and animals. He always enjoyed causing pain and suffering to people in an unmatched way. Mathieu attacked Julia, his young neighbor whom he had known since childhood, in August 2010. The attractive neighbor chose to capitalize on the girl's interest in him. After luring her into the woods, the man struck her on the head, tied her up with household-bought Scotch tape, and proceeded to mistreat the unlucky. After that, Moulines started strangling her and most likely would have murdered her, but as her mobile phone rang, the criminal flinched away, glanced around, and just walked away. After a scared Julia freed herself, she called her parents, who promptly called the police to report the occurrence. The following day, Mathieu was taken into custody. He sobbed during questioning in an effort to please the police and tried to place all the blame on the victim, saying that she was the one who provoked him by making fun of him and suggesting closeness. However, authorities recognized that he had planned the crime ahead of time and even brought duct tape to render the victim immobile. However, Mathieu escaped punishment in spite of the seriousness of the offense. Because the offender was so young, the court committed him to a psychiatric center for 4 months of mandatory treatment instead of sending him to prison. Psychiatrists and psychologists assessed his condition and worked with him during this period. The chief specialist overseeing Molinas concluded in December 2010 that he was completely recovered and that following the course of treatment, he was no longer a threat to others. After reviewing this report, the court granted the offender freedom with the condition that he only attend a number of anger management classes and receive parental support. Notably, the Molina couple worked very hard to secure their son's release as well. In addition to promising the judge that Mathieu would leave the area and not cause any more disturbance, they also agreed to see to it that the heir received therapy. The best attorneys were employed by them, and they made every effort to keep their client out of jail. Following that, the parents began searching for a new school for their kid, but they were unwilling to accept him anyplace because of his criminal record for such a significant issue. The father then went to the provincially closed College 7 himself and scheduled a meeting with the director. He promised to support him right away when it came to the college's admittance of mature students after learning about its financial difficulties. In every manner possible, Dominic Melinis defended his son by lying that there was only violence against his ex-girlfriend, despite the director's observation that the man's academic performance was too poor and that the criminal case of a prospective student could negatively impact the school's reputation. After the breakup, she allegedly sought to get back at him. Surprisingly, the leadership of the educational institution accepted Dominic's account of events and did not go into the specifics of the trial, which is why he was freed a few months later after everything had been resolved. It seems that they chose to ignore the crime and keep this information from other kids and their parents because of the sponsorship amount he had declared. Just 1 month before his 18th birthday, Mathieu had accepted the verdict in the trial, but because he was a kid when the violent and terrible crime was committed, the law gave such offenders a lower sentence, and the trial itself had to take place in private. Agnes's parents demanded that the sessions be made public, at least in part, and that journalists who would be covering the case in the media be included. The Marin couple, however, were turned away, and the trial took place in private. The case didn't start until June 18, 2013. The many errors in the Mathieu case were sharply condemned by the public prosecutor, especially the fact that the psychiatrist who concluded that the man posed no threat to others was a young lady without the necessary training. She made a deadly error and had no prior experience dealing with crooks. After the defendant had a second mental evaluation, specialists came to the conclusion that, in addition to being unrepentant, he may very easily conduct the same crime again if given the chance. This was corroborated by Mathieu himself, who claimed to have delighted in seeing the victims suffer. Marin's schizoid and paranoid disorder symptoms, along with his uncontrollably violent outbursts, made him a serious threat to others. He could, however, face legal repercussions for his activities, because he was well aware of them. Furthermore, because of the severity of the young man's offense, the prosecutor demanded that he be tried as an adult, and his request was ultimately approved. Mathieu was convicted of torture and murder with specific cruelty on June 28, 1313. He was given a life sentence and ordered to undergo forced psychotherapy. He was the second young criminal in French history to be given such a severe penalty. Despite Molinet's attorney's choice to appeal the conviction, a jury of appeals affirmed the life sentence on October 10, 2014, ruling out a 2016 review of the ruling. In a book they created and published, Mathieu's parents detailed their painful experience and acknowledged that their son is still unrepentant. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. In September 2017, a chilling and perplexing series of events occurred in a quiet community, leaving its residents in shock and disbelief. What started as a seemingly routine missing person case turned into a harrowing story of love, betrayal, and tragedy. On a sunny Tuesday in September 2017, a young woman named Laura Wallen awoke in her cozy home in Olney, Maryland. She was 31 years old and loved her job as a teacher at Lake High School. She was so good at her job that she was named Teacher of the Year just the previous year. Laura had worked hard to prepare for the new school year. She spent weeks getting her classroom ready for her students. She was looking forward to starting school again. However, something strange occurred on that fateful day. Laura didn't show up for work, which worried everyone. Her family, particularly her parents, became concerned after receiving a call from her boss informing them that she had not arrived at school. Laura was never one to miss work, particularly on the first day of school. She was passionate about teaching, and her students adored her. So when the Lauras received that call, they knew something was seriously wrong. They decided to contact the police and report her missing. The police decided to check on Laura and her home. When they arrived, her house appeared normal, with no signs of trouble. It was puzzling. Where might she be? What caused Laura to disappear? Even more concerning was that she was 4 months pregnant. The police had to find her. They contacted her boyfriend, Tyler Tessier, hoping he could provide some answers. However, Tyler stated that he had no idea where Laura was. A frantic search began. Laura's black Ford Escape was discovered parked at an apartment complex near the high school where she worked. Volunteers gathered in Howard and Montgomery counties, handing out flyers featuring Laura's photo and posting missing posters wherever they could. Tyler and Laura's parents even went on television to ask for assistance and promise a reward. Does anyone know where Laura is? Tyler, who was desperate to find Laura, addressed the news conference. He pleaded with the public to share any information they possessed. He adored Laura and was constantly worried about her. He said, "Laura, it doesn't matter what happened as long as you listen. It makes no difference what kind of trouble you're experiencing. There is nothing we can't solve together. So many people miss you. There are so many people out who have not slept, and we have not eaten. We are simply looking for you or praying that you are safe." But Tyler was also pleading for help. The police and Laura's family began to suspect that he was hiding something related to Laura's disappearance. The police noticed some inconsistencies in what he was saying, and allowing Tyler to speak at the news conference was a strategy for gathering more information. Laura was still listed as missing at the time. No one knew what happened to her or where she was, but as the investigation progressed, Tyler began to reveal some disturbing information, raising even more questions. He told the cops that Laura had asked him for assistance. According to Tyler, Laura wanted to disappear because she was pregnant with a student's child, and she was terrified and embarrassed. She did not want anyone to find out. However, only 2 days after that press conference, everything changed. Laura was a missing person until September 13, 2017, when she was murdered. The police received a tip that led them to a remote field in Damascus, Maryland. Tyler was known to frequent the area, and they discovered newly dug ground in a hidden corner of the field. They discovered something horrifying with the help of specially trained dogs. Laura's body was buried in a shallow grave. An autopsy later revealed that she had been shot in the back of the head. This was a heartbreaking and horrific turn of events, and the police were now faced with the difficult task of determining when she died, who murdered her, and why the discovery of Lauren's body marked a dark and tragic chapter in the story. And it was clear that there was a lot more to uncover. Laura's family, still reeling from the shock of her disappearance, now had to deal with the devastating reality of her murder. The search for answers has only begun. Tyler was considered a person of interest in the case because he was thought to be the last person to see Laura alive. This suspicion stemmed from inconsistencies in the various accounts he provided about his whereabouts and activities. During the relevant time period, the police had evidence that Laura was alive on September 1, as her family saw her that day. The next day, September 2, Laura went on an outing with Tyler. During this time, Laura texted her sister about the adventure Tyler had taken her on. The message read, "Tyler has taken me on a country adventure. I am not sure why, but it is for something waiting in a field." The police discovered an important clue while investigating Laura's financial transactions. They discovered that Laura's debit card was last used at a Safeway grocery store near her only residence on September 2nd, between 8:30 and 9:30 p.m. What made this discovery significant was that surveillance footage from the grocery store showed Laura wasn't alone during the transaction. Tyler was alone during the transaction. Tyler was seen with her. This information piqued the police's interest in Tyler as they attempted to piece together the events surrounding Laura's disappearance and subsequent death. But why does Tyler want Laura? The answer lay in their complicated relationship and Tyler's hidden life. Tyler and Laura had had an on and off relationship for a decade. They always found their way back together after breaking up. Their love was turbulent, with highs and lows, but Laura was looking forward to starting a family with Tyler, unaware of the dark secrets he was keeping. Laura was not aware of this. During one of the breaks, Tyler had begun dating another woman, a fellow teacher, back in 2012. He even moved in with her while still in a relationship with Laura. Neither woman knew about the other, and Tyler was able to keep his double life hidden. When Laura found out she was pregnant with Tyler's child, her father, Mark Wallen, confronted Tyler about his intentions. He was aware of Laura and Tyler's on and off relationship, as well as rumors of another woman. Tyler assured Mark that he would take care of Laura, even showing him an engagement ring and claiming he intended to propose. He also informed Mark that he had not seen the other woman in 2 years. However, it was later revealed that the ring Tyler had given Mark was used to propose to another woman, not Laura. The other woman had agreed, and their wedding was scheduled just a month after Laura was due to give birth to Tyler's child. Laura and the other woman thought they were in exclusive relationships with Tyler, but the truth was much more complicated. It appeared that Laura discovered Tyler's deception shortly before her death. She text messaged the other woman on August 28, 2017, seeking a meeting to clarify something. She made it clear in her message that she was looking for answers rather than a confrontation. Tyler allegedly began plotting Laura's murder within days of sending that message, according to the police. He appeared to have convinced the other woman that Laura was unstable and stalking him. When the other woman received Laura's text, he informed Tyler, who sent a chilling message, "I could actually kill her." Tyler initially denied any involvement with anyone other than Laura when confronted by the police. However, when confronted with evidence to the contrary, he finally admitted to his double life. Tyler was believed by the police to have brought Laura to a remote location with the intention of killing her in order to silence her and protect his secret life. Laura thought she was going to see some land Tyler wanted to buy, but the reality was far more sinister. He chose a field near the farm where he worked, a place he was very familiar with. Laura's sister had asked her to take a picture during the trip, and Laura agreed. The police would later use that image to pinpoint the location where her lifeless body was discovered. Tyler had taken her there twice, once in September 2017 and again the next day. The police believe Tyler shot Laura on September 17, and their actions following the murder were calculated and disturbing. On the same day, he texted a friend and requested a late-night ride to Baltimore. However, the friend declined to advise against such a late-night trip. Tyler's response was chilling. It's probably just attempting to clean up a mess, where the prosecutors Tyler's actions were clear at all times. A premeditated murder. They believed that his meticulous planning and choice of location indicated that he had intended to kill Laura in order to protect his secrets from Tyler, with the goal of providing closure and justice to Laura's family. But the truth would remain elusive. The shocking and tragic story of Laura Wallen and Tyler Tessier was far from over. As the case nears its climax in court, a sudden and unexpected turn of events would stun everyone, and the pursuit of justice would take a new direction. Detectives believed that after Tyler shot Laura, he used text messages to conceal evidence and cast doubt on the paternity of Laura's baby. He used Laura's phone to send a message to her sister stating, "I'm about 95 sure. Tyler is not the father. I will try to contact Antoine." Laura's sister found the text confusing. She had a close relationship with Laura and was aware that if Laura had any doubts about the baby's paternity, he would not discuss it via text message. She told the cops that Laura had dated someone named Antoine about 2 years before her death but had no contact with him since then. Tyler was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and false statements. He faced only one murder charge because Maryland law requires that the child be viable outside the womb before additional charges can be filed. When questioned by the police, Tyler initially denied any involvement or knowledge of Laura's situation. However, he later provided several conflicting accounts of the events. He initially claimed that During a heated argument in September, Laura became enraged and attacked him with scissors, causing her to fall and seemingly die after colliding with a porch post. Tyler buried her in a field, believing she had died. When questioned about the gunshot wound found during the autopsy, he stated that he was concerned that he had buried her alive and then returned to shoot her to ensure she was dead and would not suffer. Tyler later changed his story, telling the police that African-American men had entered Laura's home and kidnapped her. He claims they compelled them to drive to Damascus, where Laura was shot. When asked why he wasn't shot, Tyler explained that he begged the men to let him go. The prosecution was confident in their case, claiming Tyler was responsible for Laura's death. They contended that Tyler, who had been living a double life for years, was concerned that his secret was about to be revealed because Laura had discovered the truth. Tyler allegedly planned Laura's murder after she contacted the other woman he was involved with. Tyler was supposed to spend the weekend of September 2 with the other woman in Pennsylvania, ostensibly to look for bridesmaid dresses. Instead, he claimed he couldn't go because of a knee injury sustained while walking her dog, which proved to be a lie. He arranged to meet Laura and transport her to a remote field in Damascus, Montgomery County. The prosecution contended that Laura's murder was premeditated, as evidenced by the isolated location where she was killed and buried. They wanted to take the jury to this remote location to show the extent of its seclusion and the planning required. This visit would necessitate four-wheel drive to navigate off-road terrain, ascend a curved hill, and descend to the corner of a grassy field, demonstrating the location's remoteness and hidden nature, supporting their claim of premeditation. They also planned to show the jury an animal processing facility near the field. Prosecutors believe Tyler used a skid loader on the property to dig a shallow grave for Laura's body. Laura's front license plate and cell phone were found in a dumpster on the property. The prosecution was concerned that photographs alone would not accurately depict the field's hidden maker, implying that someone familiar with the area had chosen. They had an aerial image of the site with a tree line and a photograph of Laura in a truck at the same location. Laura had sent her sister a photo of herself from that location. Furthermore, phone records for Tyler and Laura showed them at the location where Laura was later discovered, and the prosecution planned to tell the jury that after burying Laura, Tyler drove her car to a Columbia apartment complex, where it was later discovered. They planned to call witnesses, including one of Tyler's friends, who claimed Tyler asked for a ride from the apartment complex and requested the opportunity to present their case to a jury on September 28. At 5 a.m., Tyler's lifeless body was discovered in his jail cell only hours before his trial was scheduled to begin. He hanged himself inside the Montgomery County Correctional Facility in Rockville, Maryland, leaving 5 suicide notes on the top of his bunk bed. This tragic turn of events meant that the prosecution would be denied the opportunity to outline and prove their case to a jury. Tyler's death brought an abrupt and unexpected conclusion to a case that had sparked widespread interest due to its complex and disturbing circumstances. Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. One of the strongest, most uncontrollable, and most unpredictable emotions with the potential for real destruction is teenage love. A teen's first conscious experience of emotional and passionate feelings is brought on by hormonal changes and changes in how they interact with others. Everyone, however, perceives and feels this sensitive sensation differently. Young individuals frequently take risks in an attempt to impress their significant other and gain their attention, favor, and adoration, because this is an age of rebellion, self-discovery, and the desire for self-affirmation. The bucolic and serene Georgian village of Lawrenceville was the scene of a string of incredibly violent crimes in the spring of 2017. 2 persons lost their lives as a result of these acts, while 4 more were put in grave danger. For financial gain, an elderly couple was tormented and beaten to death. Law enforcement's quick action helped put an end to the violent rampage, preventing the young criminals from finishing what they had begun. 2 pupils were seriously hurt but amazingly survived. Because the lovers intended to die together, the press likened the story of these young offenders, Cassandra Bjorg, 17, and Johnny Ryder, 19, to the story of Romeo and Juliet. But they liked to think of themselves as Bonnie and Clyde. The most horrifying thing, despite their ignorance of the fabled criminal duo's past, was that they specifically targeted members of their own families in an attempt to get rid of everyone they cared about. In late January 2017, Cassandra Bjorg and Johnny Ryder met in the company of mutual acquaintances and fell in love at first sight. At the time, Johnny had just turned 19 and had already been married and divorced. He was not prepared for family life, and the marriage was a forced arrangement because his underage fiancée had gotten pregnant, while Cassandra was 17 and still enrolled in school. But the pregnancy ended too soon, and within 6 months, their partnership was over. Johnny was enthralled by Cassandra and fell deeply in love with her at first sight. Despite her small stature and good looks, Cassandra was a fierce, unbridled energy ball. She took Taekwondo, Wushu, and Korean martial arts like Tang Soo Do very seriously. Bjorg had even competed several times, but she eventually stopped training, saying that emotional upheaval had caused her to lose her focus. In actuality, the schoolgirl's bad habits that were incompatible with athletics and her preference for partying with friends were the primary causes. The girl was attractive and had a trim build. She was good at drawing attention to herself and manipulating people, particularly the boys who were in love with her. Many now question if she really loved Johnny or if she only exploited him to further her evil. The boy, on the other hand, was obviously smitten with her and would stop at nothing to win her over. He felt he had discovered his soulmate and true love. While his new girlfriend resided with her grandparents, who loved their only granddaughter, Ryder lived with his mother and 2 sisters in his parents' home. The young couple fell in love almost immediately after meeting, and they rushed to show their significant others to their family members to show how serious they were about their plans. But their loved ones disapproved of their decisions, which infuriated them and put them in grave peril. In this criminal case, too many circumstances came together to create a terrible tragedy, even though it is likely that this couple would never have committed a severe crime on their own, much less deprived their family members of their lives. Johnny revealed that Cassandra was the source of horrific ideas that her partner was prepared to carry out without hesitation, while his girlfriend was susceptible to manipulation and influence due to her addiction to illegal substances. What information is available about Cassandra Bjorg? On January 19, 2000, Cassandra Bjorg was born in Peachtree Corners, Georgia, which is in Gwinnett County. She was born out of wedlock to Amanda Sterling, who had her as her sole child. Cassandra never interacted with her real father and never knew him. Cassandra had behavioral and aggressive problems from an early age, since her mother was more concerned with her personal life than with rearing her daughter. Cassandra's mother married Stephen when she was 15 years old. Her stepfather started making attempts toward his young stepdaughter and displaying abnormal interest in her. As a habitual liar who was always getting into trouble, Cassandra tried to inform her mother about this, but she did not believe her and assumed that her daughter was making it up. The teenager then complained about the situation to her grandparents, Wendy and Randall, over the phone. The elderly couple felt it would be better for their lone grandchild to live with them. After becoming very worried about the situation, the 15-year-old girl so relocated to her grandparents' large 2-story home in Lawrenceville in October 2015. She had her own room there, and her grandparents rarely denied her anything, giving her all she needed. Cassandra deftly used Wendy and Randall's generosity, who thought that their love and attention would help their granddaughter recover. She ran away from home frequently, stopped playing sports, missed school, and hooked out with the wrong crowd. She also began taking money from her family members and using it to buy illegal drugs and alcohol. She once threatened to kill her grandma after she was unable to obtain the quantity she required. The Bjorg family phoned the police over 30 times between October 2015 and March 2017 due to Cassandra's uncontrollable behavior, which included frequent runs, unexplained disappearances, fights, theft, and aggressive behavior while under the influence of drugs. After Cassandra started dating Johnny Ryder, her conduct became unmanageable. Wendy and Randall were adamantly opposed to her bringing her boyfriend to her grandparents' house and telling them he would now live with them. When Johnny attempted to invite Cassandra to live with him at his family's house, a similar circumstance happened. The pair was expelled due to opposition from his mother and sisters. The couple quickly came to the conclusion that anyone who obstructed their relationship ought to be removed. They intended to see Cassandra's mother and stepfather to make amends, take all of their savings, deal with Cassandra's grandparents, get rid of Johnny's family, seize their money, and then run away to Florida to spend as much money as they could from the 3 residences. The harsh treatment of the grandparents. Cassandra was aware of the precise location of her grandparents' home where a sizable quantity of money was kept. Cassandra didn't know the password to the little safe that was kept in a closet in one of the second-floor rooms. The explanation is that Wendy and Randall started hiding the money after they saw it was missing and realized their cherished grandchild was stealing. Randall, Wendy's husband, had just turned 64, and Wendy herself was 63. After more than 40 years of marriage, they had a daughter, bought their ideal house, and intended to spend their golden years on the second floor. They occupied 2 bedrooms that were next to each other and had separate bathrooms. Because they thought their granddaughter could be rehabilitated and didn't want to ruin her life, the old couple didn't want to send her back to her mother or place her in juvenile detention, despite their inability to handle her. Cassandra allowed Johnny to enter the residence with kitchen knives and baseball bats on the evening of April 2, 2017, after the elderly couple had already gone to bed. The pair made their way to the second level via the stairs. While Johnny went to Randall and began striking him with the bat, Cassandra went into her grandmother's room where she was sleeping and stood beside her bed. It took the old man a while to comprehend what was going on. He was scared, confused, and helpless to protect himself. Johnny leaped onto the bed, stood on top of his victim, and kept striking him. Wendy, meantime, awoke to the commotion, hearing slow thuds and what sounded like a garbled cry in the shadows. She recognized the figure by her bed as her granddaughter. She was stabbed in the shoulder as soon as she attempted to stand up. Deep slashes on the woman's hands showed that she attempted self-defense, but the forces were not equal. In the adjacent room where Johnny was mistreating her grandfather, Cassandra pulled her grandma by the hair, demanding the code to the safe and threatening to kill them if they didn't comply. The young couple bound the elderly couple with tape and kept beating them. The elderly couple prayed their granddaughter wouldn't dare to take away the lives of her closest relatives, even though Johnny was holding a knife to Randall's throat. But when Cassandra Command's boyfriend began stabbing Randall in the stomach a minute later, Wendy screamed, pleading with them to stop, and revealed the code to the safe. In order to open the safe, Cassandra hurried to her grandmother's room right away. Then, with a victorious yell and a few fat envelopes of cash, she ran back to show her accomplice that they had succeeded. But the old couple's agony didn't stop there. In an attempt to obtain the bank card credentials so they could steal more money, Cassandra and her boyfriend persisted in beating them. It's possible that Wendy and Randall began saying farewell and declaring their love for one another after realizing they wouldn't be left alive. Later, when she was being questioned, Cassandra recalled this, and it made her laugh. A lot. Once they had all the information they needed, the young monsters pulled Wendy into the toilet after killing Randall with a knife to the neck in front of his wife. They were still dealing with her. Her own granddaughter killed her by striking her head with a baseball bat. Cassandra once bemoaned to Johnny that Wendy would not pass away and would still be alive. Then, to make sure the woman had no chance of surviving, Johnny cut her throat. Cut party on the bones. Their granddaughter and her companion remained in the house, while the 2 bodies rotted in the second-floor rooms, following the cruel treatment of the elderly couple. The young pair used the pilfered funds to purchase anything they want, including alcohol and any illegal drugs they could find. They admitted during questioning that they wanted to try everything and that they could now afford to do so. A few days later, Wendy's sister called the police to ask for a welfare check on her relatives, who hadn't spoken to her since April 1st. Wendy's bad vision made it unusual for her to simply send texts rather than answer the phone. The texts requested not to worry and said that everything was okay. However, this just made matters worse. To make sure everything was okay, law enforcement dispatched a patrol officer to the specified house, but nobody answered the door. Nothing looked strange at first. Neighbors noticed the couple's vehicle heading downtown, but there were no indications of a break-in or that the mail had been picked up. The officer came to the conclusion in the morning that the elderly couple had left the residence without a warrant to search it while out on errands. After stating that he had completed his work and found nothing odd, he departed. In the meantime, the juvenile offenders went shopping in the victim's vehicle. They ordered meal delivery and purchased food and drink every day, but they were unable to consume all of the food they purchased, so the rotten and uneaten goods were left to fester in boxes on the floor, tables, windowsills, and every other surface in the house. They took money out of Wendy's bank card as the money started to run low, but they were unable to locate Randall's wallet using his cards. Cassandra and Johnny invited their friends to a party at their residence, approximately a week after the crime against her grandparents. They had a major issue, though, because the remains on the second story had decayed considerably and were giving off an odor that was hard to ignore. After discovering 2 cans of construction sealant in the garage, Johnny made the decision to seal the doors of the rooms containing the remains, but first they had to cover up the stench. They covered the bodies with several liters of chlorine bleach that they purchased from a hardware shop. After that, Johnny meticulously caulked all the cracks around the bathroom door and the bedroom door. The couple informed their pals over the phone that Cassandra had a lot of money after her grandparents left town for a few days, and that she intended to have a large party with wine and more entertaining activities. But their buddies found the story highly dubious. The majority of them were aware of the several occasions Wendy and Randall had called the police due to their inability to manage their granddaughter. As a result, nobody dared to go to this peculiar gathering. Only a tiny bad company of problematic youths, including those who could obtain illegal substances and consented to do so in exchange for a reward, eventually assembled at the house. The guests complained about the awful stench, even while they were drunk, and Cassandra attributed it to a clogged sewer. It became intolerable for the criminals to remain in the residence, so the following day they decided it was time to depart. But they needed additional money for their getaway, because they were running low on cash and had almost used all the card's balance. The strategy to obtain it had been simmering for some time and now had to be put into action. However, more of their family members would have had to die for this. On Friday, April 7, 2017, the family was saved by an unintentional victim. The pair infiltrated the Ryder household. Johnny had keys, so it was home. They got there in the morning when Johnny's sisters and mother were at the university working. They found enough cash and goods to sustain them for a while once they were able to raid the house. The criminals purchased bear spray, a considerably larger and more potent aerosol that resembles pepper spray, and armed themselves with baseball bats. This unique spray, which is intended to deter hostile bears, contains potent tearing and irritating chemicals that burn skin and mucous membranes chemically, causing acute coughing and excruciating agony in humans. This weapon has the potential to be lethal. They planned to attack and kill each member of the family one at a time, then take the loot and flee with it. They knew roughly when each member would arrive home. Assuming the mother and sisters had left for the weekend, no one would be searching for them by Monday, giving the criminals a few days' advantage. After her university lessons, Melissa, Johnny's younger sister, was the first to return home. However, she was accompanied by her boyfriend, whom she had asked over so they could have some alone time together. The thieves chose to follow their strategy and add another victim to their blacklist, despite the complexity of the situation. Melissa and her boyfriend realized there had been intruders, probably burglars, when they came in and saw the mess. Melissa rushed to the phone right away to call the police, but she was unable to do so. And bitter orange haze filled the room, causing their skin to feel like it was on fire, their throats to burn, and their eyes to water. Abruptly, 2 bat-wielding figures with scarfed faces emerged and started beating the pupils. The victims, however, surprisingly put up a strong fight. Unaware of the bear spray's potency, the attackers started strangling themselves during the ensuing altercation. The homeowner, Johnny's mother, who had come home from work earlier than normal, appeared as the front door opened abruptly. While the criminals were able to flee through the kitchen door, she shouted and dialed 911. Johnny took extra keys to his mother's car during the robbery, and they used them to escape, leaving behind the primary piece of evidence, a car registered to the late Randall, while Cassandra dropped the car keys they had brought with them during the attack. Although the crooks wanted to murder the additional witness right away, the couple didn't expect Melissa to return home with her boyfriend because it was difficult to attack and kill 2 strong young people at once. Luckily, they were unable to finish their plot. They obviously miscalculated the might of House of Horrors, their weapon of choice, and overestimated their own talents. Although both attack victims lived, they were admitted to the hospital with various levels of wounds and chemical burns. The abandoned vehicle in the backyard, which did not belong to the Ryder family, piqued the interest of the responding law enforcement authorities. They identified the legitimate owner of the vehicle by looking through the registration plates. It soon became apparent that the car's owner had phoned the police earlier that week, but no one had come to the door. Officers went straight to Randall and Wendy's house, and this time, after failing to receive a response, they pried open the door and went inside. They were instantly struck by the smell of rotting, which was obviously coming from one of the bedrooms upstairs. The floor and bed were stained with blood, and the closet was open, exposing an empty safe. The door had been sealed with construction adhesive, making it hard to enter the other bedroom, and taking time and effort to pry it open. The decomposing body of an elderly guy with his hands bound behind his back and obvious marks of extreme torture was on the floor when the cops eventually made their way inside. Additionally, the bathroom door was sealed, making it more difficult to break in. The homeowner's wife's remains were discovered. She had clearly been beaten and tormented before having her neck cut, which is how she died. Empty beer bottles littered the house. The sink was piled high with filthy dishes, and there were garbage boxes and containers of ruined takeout food all over the place. She became the main suspect in this case because police had been to the residence dozens of times over the previous year and a half and knew that the murdered couple had a granddaughter who often ran away, acted aggressively, and got into trouble. However, dangerous guests, where can I locate the youngster who is accused of such a horrible crime? Upon learning of what had transpired at the Borgi residence, the injured rider's relatives instantly implicated Cassandra, claiming that Johnny might be her accomplice because he was enamored with her and might follow her example. The automobile in which the young robbers and offenders fled was also listed as wanted. In order to wash away the bear spray residue and ease the excruciating burning, the couple went to a store after leaving the site and purchased 5 liters of milk. Johnny reflected for a moment and thought of Jason, his best buddy from high school, with whom he had been inseparable in their senior year, but had nearly lost touch. The criminals made the decision to temporarily seek refuge and assistance at Jason's house after graduating. When his old classmate showed up at his flat with a girl, Jason was taken aback. Although the two appeared menacing, Johnny asserted that they were in danger and had no other options. Johnny claims that he and his mother got into a heated disagreement about his girlfriend, whom she didn't like. According to rumors, his mother sprayed them both with pepper spray and threw him out. The unexpected visitors requested to clean up and take a shower. In addition to providing clean clothes, meals, and the opportunity to spend the night, Jason and his mother were incredibly generous and let the couple use their restroom. Since they had nowhere else to go, the two accepted the offer. The apartment's owner made coffee and breakfast for everyone in the morning. She engaged the guests in friendly conversation and inquired if she could be of any further assistance. Outside, the sound of police sirens suddenly became more audible. A minute later, cops used a megaphone to call out to Johnny and Cassandra by name and urge them to surrender as police cars pulled up just beneath the windows. This change in circumstances surprised Jason and his mother. After thanking their host for their kindness and directing them to vacate the flat, Johnny grabbed a big kitchen knife. The crooks shut themselves inside, and the hosts, instantly frightened, hurried to the escape. They decided it would be better to die together, and they had no plans to give up. The crooks realized that a SWAT team would arrive at any moment, and that they couldn't hide in someone else's apartment for very long after failing Romeo and Juliet. With a knife in hand, they proceeded to the restroom and, in the hopes that the wounds would bleed out rapidly, made multiple deep cuts on their wrists. Already losing consciousness, Johnny pulled out his phone and left his mother a voicemail pleading for her forgiveness. He apologized for what he had done. He claimed that he shouldn't have harmed his family because he loved them so much. He went on to say that this was his last message and that he was passing away in the arms of his cherished girlfriend. But no one received any such texts from Cassandra. The young couple was lying on the tiled floor in one another's arms, surrounded by a massive pool of blood, when the cops broke into the apartment and pried open the bathroom door. Despite being unconscious, they both displayed signs of life. After receiving emergency medical care, they were taken to the hospital. Shocking admissions made by the juvenile offenders. The young couple inquired about one another as soon as they were conscious again. The first person to confess was Johnny, who said he felt bad about what he had done. His girlfriend, meanwhile, made an effort to appear helpless and blamed her partner for everything. She stated that she was extremely furious with herself, had been depressed for years, and no longer wanted to live. But as she described what had happened, she unintentionally revealed that she had long wished for her grandparents to die. Cassandra acted like a child during the interrogation, making expressions, complaining about the unappetizing hospital food, and even flirting with the police. It was only after a restaurant gave her quick food, which she had asked, that she began to speak. Even the most experienced officers were taken aback by what the teenager disclosed. Cassandra gently responded that her grandparents had lived long enough when asked why she took their life. She went on to say that they forced her to attend school, ruined her fun, and concealed money that she needed. Cassandra was simply angry because she couldn't locate her grandfather's bank card and didn't express regret for robbing the few people who loved her of their life. Grandpa was always damn smart, she said, laughing when he informed her that he had hidden his wallet beneath his pillow because he was afraid she would steal it. The teenage criminals also acknowledged that they planned to kill the Ryder family as payback for their rejection of Cassandra and their attempts to keep Johnny from seeing her because they believed she was a negative influence. Because they believed that deceased people don't require money, they also intend to loot the family. They then want to pay a visit to Cassandra's mother and stepfather in order to exact revenge on them for their mistreatment of her. This couple planned to spend their money and enjoy life by the sea in Florida. The couple reconnected in the courtroom a few months after the abortive attempt on their lives. They constantly argued, criticized one another, and even used slurs, giving the impression that there was no longer any love or passion between them. Both ultimately entered guilty pleas to the robbery, the assault on the students, and the offenses against the elderly couple. Both Johnny Ryder and Cassandra Bjorgi were given 2 life sentences, with the possibility of parole after the court found them guilty on all counts. Cassandra said she had nothing to repent for, but after 60 years, Johnny showed sincere regret and apologized to everyone he had harmed. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The Jansen family appeared to be just another loving, close-knit family, always willing to lend a helping hand to one another. However, everything changed one day. Even their closest friends found it hard to believe that something so shocking had occurred in their home. A string of incidents that rocked the family and left everyone in their wake in complete shock were concealed behind this mystery. Neighbors, friends, and law enforcement all attempted to piece together what exactly happened behind closed doors and what might have led to the dissolution of this seemingly ideal family. Randy Jansen led an apparently ordinary life in the small, sleepy towns with brick storefronts and quaint coffee shops amidst the thick forests of British Columbia. Randy had grown up in Langley, a small town that many people view as a tranquil haven. However, years of arduous work and aspirations that didn't always result in happiness lay behind this calm exterior. Randy had a strong relationship with his father, who was employed at a nearby lumber mill from a young age. Randy learned all he knew about woodworking from his father, and he followed in his footsteps by working at the same mill after high school. Long shifts and a great deal of physical exertion were necessary for the demanding work, but Randy was used to such difficulties. Randy was just one of many people in Langley who believed that the lumber mill was an essential part of the community's economy and way of life. He committed himself to the arduous task of transporting logs and processing wood for more than 10 years. Even though the work was repetitive and draining, it made him feel secure and proud. Even though every day was the same, Randy found meaning in the routine of his work and his role in the neighborhood. If the lumber mill stood for security, then music was Randy's release, a means of expressing feelings that he wasn't always able to articulate. Since his early years, music had been a part of his life. And as time went on, singing and playing the guitar changed from being a pastime to becoming an essential outlet. He often played at a local bar in Langley, where people would congregate to watch live performances and relax after their own exhausting workdays. Randy transformed his typically quiet and reserved manner into a dynamic and captivating presence that enthralled his audience. His genuine and passionate performances were adored by the locals, and they provided Randy with a sense of fulfillment and connection that was often lacking in his daily life. On what appeared to be a typical evening, Randy met Laurel, the woman who would forever alter his life, at that neighborhood bar. Laurel, who worked as a bartender and was 6 years older than Randy, frequently watched his shows from behind the counter. Charming and self-assured, Laurel was adored by customers for her ability to foster a welcoming environment and her honest, approachable manner. What began as informal discussions, initially about music and later about life, swiftly developed into a more profound bond. They became closer because of their love of music and similar aspirations. Even though her life took a different turn, Laurel always wanted to pursue a career in music and played the piano. Together with a sincere interest in one another, this shared dream quickly developed into something far deeper. Randy's life at the lumber mill went on as usual, but Laurel's presence now added color to it. As they started making plans for the future together, their bond grew stronger. Despite his comfort, Langley started to feel too small for their shared dreams. In their ideal world, music would serve as the cornerstone of their future rather than merely a pastime. Randy gained a renewed sense of purpose, love, and hope for the future from his work at the mill, his performances at the bar, and his evenings with Laurel. Randy and Laurel frequently talked about their 1990 wedding day. Only their closest friends and family were present at the modest ceremony, which had a warm, personal feel. Live music, exemplified by a song Randy sang for his bride, signaled the start of a life full of dreams and love. Their world revolved around their daughter Emily, who was born a few years after their wedding. Anyone who knew the family could see how much Randy loved Emily, and he frequently boasted that she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Emily's life took a sudden and challenging turn when she was only 8 years old. Her sudden, severe headaches became so incapacitating that she was unable to pursue her musical endeavors any further. Emily had demonstrated exceptional singing ability at an early age, winning prizes in competitions and enthralling her parents with her voice. She had been attending vocal lessons and pursuing her dream of becoming a singer, leading a busy life. Motivated by her achievements, her parents made every effort to encourage her aspiration. Randy and Laurel initially struggled to comprehend what was happening to their daughter. They were unaware of her condition despite multiple medical tests and doctor visits that yielded no conclusive results. Because the bright lights and cacophonous classroom atmosphere caused more severe headaches, Emily was forced to drop out of school and transition to home-based learning. She spent most of her time in her room, which turned into a dimly lit haven. As she suffered, Randy and Laurel took turns taking care of her, doing everything they could to make her feel better. Doctors finally diagnosed migraines after conducting a number of tests. The whole family suffered a terrible blow. Emily's prescribed medications provided only a limited amount of relief, lowering her pain levels but never completely halting the attacks. Her greatest source of happiness, the music she once loved so much, was now out of her grasp. Once a vibrant and active young child, Emily grew more reclusive and spent most of her time in darkness and silence. In a desperate attempt to support their daughter, Randy and Laurel looked everywhere. They looked into alternative therapies, spoke with a lot of specialists, and tried a lot of treatments, but none of them provided the long-term respite they so desperately sought. The medical forecast was bleak. Many people with migraines must live with the pain for the rest of their lives. According to statistics, 34% of people with migraines had trouble finding work, 30% had trouble finishing their education, and roughly 53% were unable to drive because of their symptoms. Even though these figures made Emily's illness medically common, they didn't lessen the pain her parents were feeling as they saw their daughter's vitality wane. For Randy, these were especially difficult years. Once his haven, music, turned into a painful reminder that Emily was no longer able to experience the passion that had made her life so happy. Without Emily's voice to accompany him, his guitar-playing evenings had become meaningless, and he no longer found joy in playing at the neighborhood bar where he had once flourished. He began to spend more time at home, staying near Emily, and doing his best to help. But Randy and Laurel felt more and more powerless as Emily's pain increased. Their once vibrant and determined daughter now spent her days cooped up in her room, shut off from the outside world and light. Randy kept working, but his mind was constantly on Emily, and he woke up every day hoping to find a way to make her pain go away. Emily's health had gotten worse by the time she turned 18. Her migraine attacks increased in frequency and intensity, occasionally lasting several days. She was unable to learn and keep up friendships because of the constant pain. Emily persisted in pursuing her goals in spite of these obstacles. In order to pursue a career in the fine arts and eventually become an opera singer, she enrolled in the arts program at the University of British Columbia. Emily saw going to university as an opportunity to restore her sense of normalcy and get closer to the life she had always dreamed of, not just an academic pursuit. Emily forced herself to remain engaged in spite of her physical tiredness and ongoing pain flare-ups. She studied literature, art history, and music theory in addition to taking voice lessons. She even took part in concerts and student events whenever she could. Her classmates appreciated her perseverance in staying active in university life, despite the obstacles she encountered. Her actions, however, concealed a difficult battle going on behind the scenes. Emily frequently had to skip class and make up lost time on her own. Emily felt weak, sleepy, and exhausted from the strong drugs she was taking to treat her migraines. To reduce her symptoms, she was prescribed triptans, anticonvulsants, and antidepressants, but these medications had serious side effects, including depression, difficulty focusing, and a general deterioration in her physical health. Emily eventually started avoiding medicine as much as she could in order to lessen its effects on her body. Instead, she looked into alternative ways to treat her illness. Emily avoided triggers like bright lights, strong smells, and loud noises, used cold compresses on her head, and resorted to breathing techniques and meditation. Her room turned into a haven where she could go to escape anything that made her suffering worse. Her parents, Randy and Laurel, alternated in taking care of her and doing everything they could to alleviate her agony, but during the worst episodes, she spent whole days in the dark, protected from light and sound. Nevertheless, Emily did her best to keep things normal. Despite not being able to see her friends as frequently as she used to, she maintained contact with them. Her friends never deserted her, even though she occasionally had to postpone plans due to unexpected migraine attacks. To ensure she didn't feel alone, they would pay her a visit at home, spending time with her and providing support. Emily was unable to give up the things she loved, even though her condition limited her options. No matter how challenging the path became, she remained steadfast in her resolve to pursue her music and live life to the fullest. Randy Jansen shocked everyone who knew him with a Facebook post on May 7, 2015. He admitted to doing unimaginable things over the past 10 days in this post. He started off by writing about his daughter Emily, calling her the most ideal daughter anyone could ask for. She was gifted, smart, and compassionate. Emily made their lives so much more joyful by bringing laughter into their home and always lending a helping hand to others, even when she was having difficulties herself. However, she had to let go of the dreams she had fought so hard to realize because her illness had taken so much from her. Migraines had plagued Emily since elementary school. Deep depression resulted from the ongoing pain, and days when it didn't stop for even a second became her reality. Randy explained that while his daughter spent her days in hospitals or in her quiet, dark room, she would observe her classmates going about their daily lives. Emily tried to hope for a better future in spite of everything, but nothing seemed to work. Randy was employed at a lumber mill, but he spent all of his free time with his daughter. He told his friends that he couldn't imagine his life without Emily and that she was everything to him. He was driven to the brink of despair by seeing her suffer and being powerless to stop it. Randy was obviously having a lot of emotional difficulties, as friends remembered when he confided in them about his suffering. Randy made a choice one day that would change everything. He acknowledged taking a gun and killing Emily in a Facebook post, saying he did so to relieve her of the constant agony. He described how he saw her as an angel, free from her agony, floating above the clouds with her long hair blowing in the wind. He continued after that. Randy disclosed that he had also killed his wife, Laurel, because he couldn't imagine her having to deal with the loss of their daughter. He killed his sister Shelley a few days later, claiming he didn't want her to live with the guilt of what he had done. Randy clarified in the post that Emily had made every effort to get better. He talked about how resilient and strong she was, but in the end, the illness had broken her. He talked about how helpless he felt knowing he could do nothing to stop her daily suffering. In the end, Randy felt that this was the only way to help Emily, and he had repeatedly told friends that he would do anything for her. Randy's friends and acquaintances called the police right away after he published the post. They wanted to make sure Randy's family was safe because they were appalled by what they read. Many people were shocked by the post and found it difficult to comprehend the scope of what had transpired. After receiving several calls, including one from Randy's close friend Brian Jones, law enforcement moved swiftly to the scene. To conduct an investigation, officers were sent to Randy's residence. One of Randy's best friends, Brian Jones, read the Facebook post and was overcome with confusion and fear. When he saw the signature at the end, a nickname Randy had used since they were in school. He realized his friend had written those words. At first, he thought it was an error or some cruel joke. Brian realized right away how serious the situation was and that he needed to take quick action. He tried calling Randy on the phone as he made his way to Shelley's house after leaving work early. His worry only grew with each call that went unanswered. There was a pile of undeliverable newspapers on the porch when Brian got to Shelley's house. He thought this was odd because Shelley was dependable and never skipped a duty. The windows were covered with drawn curtains, and her old van was parked in the driveway. There were no signs of activity, and the yard was eerily quiet. Brian repeatedly knocked on the door, but no one answered. The scene was eerily silent and eerie in every way. Following the death of their parents, Shelley had led a solitary life. She didn't have kids, lived alone, and didn't often talk to her neighbors. She was renowned for being reliable and consistent in her work, and her primary duty was delivering newspapers. Brian became alarmed at the sight of the unopened newspapers right away. He made the decision to call the police because he knew something was amiss. He was told that he wasn't the first person to voice concerns about the family when he got to the dispatcher. They had already sent out a patrol unit to see how things were going. Randy wrote at the conclusion of his Facebook post that his family was now pain-free and in a better place. He apologized to everyone he had harmed, accepted full responsibility, and conveyed regret for his actions. Brian experienced a wave of shock and disbelief as he read the post's eerie closing. "Rest in peace, my little family." He had always known Randy to be a good-hearted, loving man who cherished his family. He found it incomprehensible that his friend could have committed such a crime or even had a gun. He remembered Randy's love and devotion when he talked about his family, and he found it hard to comprehend how things could have gone so wrong. Randy Jansen was inside his house when the police arrived, and they tried to get in touch with him. Through a second-story window, officers saw him brandishing a gun. They tried calling Randy on the phone and using loudspeakers, but he did not answer. The officers knew they needed to proceed cautiously to prevent further escalation because they were acutely aware of how tense the situation was. Negotiators surrounded the house and got to work, but Randy didn't show any signs of giving up or wanting to talk. The standoff turned into something much more dangerous after a few hours. Officers saw smoke rising from the upper floor after Randy set the house on fire. There were unsuccessful attempts to enter the house. Access through the windows was cut off as the flames spread too quickly. On the first floor, officers saw a body covered in a sheet, but they couldn't get to it to identify it. The officers were forced to flee as the entire house was engulfed in flames in a matter of minutes. When firefighters got there, the house was completely destroyed by the fire and could not be saved. Even after it was put out, the fire was so severe that it was dangerous to enter the interior for a few days. 3 days after the fire, on May 10, investigators were finally allowed to enter the burned-out remnants of the house to start their investigation. Investigators discovered 3 bodies inside the burned-out house. Emily, 19, was found with her body wrapped in a sheet in her bedroom. Laurel, 50, was discovered in the kitchen, similarly wrapped in a blanket. It was discovered by investigators that both had been shot in the head twice, about 10 days prior to Randy writing his Facebook post. The body of Randy was discovered in a bedroom on the 2nd floor. Before he set the house on fire, he had killed himself with a gun. It was evident from Randy's body's location and the weapon's remnants that he had been in severe emotional pain when he decided to take his own life. Police discovered Shelley's body in the living room when they got to Randy's sister's house. Shelley, whose body was similarly wrapped in a blanket, had also been shot twice in the head. Since there were no indications of a struggle at the scene, investigators deduced that she had passed away 2 days prior to her discovery, indicating that Randy had taken her by surprise. The past year had seen a serious decline in Emily's health. In order to relieve her unbearable pain, doctors had turned to giving her morphine injections. Neighbors frequently witnessed her parents escorting her home following hospital stays, and these injections were a last resort. Emily needed assistance just to walk because she had gotten so weak. Everyone who knew the family found these times to be devastating. Despite all of the difficulties they encountered, Emily's father, Randy Jansen, always did his best to take care of his family. He sought treatment from the family physician a year prior to the tragic events because he was experiencing severe stress and chronic insomnia. He told the physician that he found it hard to watch his daughter suffer. Randy rejected the medication because he thought it wouldn't solve the underlying issue, even though the doctor advised him to try to get more sleep and suggested sedatives. According to Randy's close friend Brian Jones, Randy had never mentioned having suicidal thoughts or wanting to harm other people. He said Randy was a steady, industrious man who was always willing to help. Randy put his family first, and no one could have predicted that he was capable of such a thing. But Brian pointed out that Randy was at his breaking point. He finally made a terrible choice because he could no longer stand to see his daughter suffer. It was impossible for many neighbors who had known Randy since they were young to reconcile the events with the man they remembered. They said that he had never displayed any signs of cruelty or aggression and was a kind and gentle person. They believed that his acts were motivated by desperation and an inability to handle the suffering and distress that surrounded his family. Randy once told a neighbor that he wouldn't have a reason to live if his daughter ever died. In spite of those statements, Randy spent 10 days living in the house with his wife and daughter's bodies before ending his own life. 4 days before the tragedy, Emily sent out her final tweet, which said, "I complain about the pain, but at least I'm here to feel it. I thank God for the chance to live." It was a reflection of her will to live despite the tremendous suffering she had to endure. She frequently fought to maintain her optimism in her social media posts. She made an effort to remain optimistic despite her illness, even when things appeared dire. Emily was regarded as a good-hearted and sympathetic young lady who made an effort to remain aware of her surroundings. She loved to sing, and when her health permitted it, she did so in the local church. Her performances were remembered with fondness by many Langley residents. Her church attendance decreased as her illness worsened, but she continued to be giving and considerate. On her best days, she would even assist neighborhood children with their homework. She would also bake with her mother and share sweets with neighbors. Emily's mother, Laurel, supported her daughter to the best of her ability. She expressed the anguish and despair she experienced while witnessing her daughter's suffering on Twitter when she wrote, "Emily is back in the hospital, praying to God they can help her. I feel so helpless." Despite being close to emotional exhaustion, Laurel persisted in trying to find ways to improve Emily's condition. Randy's sister Shelley was also unable to predict the tragedy that would occur. None of the family members thought their fates would be determined in such a terrible manner. Randy frequently confided in friends over the past year about the immense stress and strain that Emily's illness had placed on him. Nobody could have foreseen that Randy would eventually become so emotionally unstable that he would choose to murder his family members. As previously stated, Emily kept a Twitter account where she expressed her opinions. She wasn't giving up, as evidenced by her posts. She wrote just prior to the tragedy, "For the first time in 2 years, I've gone 12 hours without pain. I'm so tired of hurting, but I need to keep going." Her words demonstrated her will to fight in spite of the overwhelming obstacles. But Randy was unable to bear the emotional burden any longer. As their daughter's health deteriorated, Laurel was also profoundly impacted. Her distress was reflected in her tweets. The family made an effort to help one another in spite of their desperation, but things kept getting worse, and none of them could predict where it would go. The details have now been revealed, and it is evident how hopelessness, hidden struggles, and despair led to an unexpected tragedy. The Jansen family's story serves as a sobering reminder that even behind seemingly impenetrable walls, unspeakable suffering can fester beneath the surface and occasionally explode in unexpected ways. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Rosemary Silva, 32, and her fiancé, Udirli Damasceno, 30, were getting ready for their wedding ceremony on Sunday, December 4, 2016, which was scheduled to take place in a charming rural setting close to Sao Paulo. To impress the guests and her future husband, Rosemary had orchestrated a spectacular helicopter arrival. But a sudden tragedy made everything into a nightmare just before the ceremony was scheduled to start. Rosemary, a 32-year-old nurse assistant, grew up in a big family in Sao Paulo. Her parents taught her the importance of kindness and compassion at a young age, which led her to pursue a career in helping people. Her coworkers always felt they had her undivided attention and frequently complimented her on her diligence, patience, and kind disposition. When she wasn't working, Rosemary was a happy, energetic person who loved hanging out with friends, volunteering at her church, and making sure her loved ones were safe and content. Since she was a young girl, Rosemary had dreamed of her wedding day. She imagined herself wearing a gorgeous white gown, walking down a flower-adorned aisle, and being surrounded by the smiles of loved ones. She had been inspired by these fantasies to diligently save money for the ideal celebration. Her spectacular helicopter arrival was one of the unique touches she had in mind, a surprise that would enthrall everyone present. Uderli, who was 30 at the time, was a mechanic from Sao Paulo who was raised in a hard-working household that valued simplicity and honesty. He had a strong interest in mechanics from an early age and progressively developed into a proficient professional. Uderli had a reputation for always carrying out his duties with honesty and for being steady, collected, and trustworthy. Despite his previous marriage ending in divorce, he remained close to his daughter from that marriage and spent as much time as he could with her. Although they didn't click right away, the two quickly became closer after meeting at an evangelical church. At first, they approached their discussions warily, as if they were two strangers who were not sure what they had in common. But as their relationship deepened, it became clear that they were destined to be together. In 2015, the pair started dating, and a year later, Uderli proposed, which Rosemary happily accepted. Rosemary and Uderli immediately started organizing their wedding after announcing their engagement. From the selection of flowers and music to the seating configurations and venue decor, Rosemary was adamant that everything be flawless. This was supposed to be a fairy tale day, and Rosemary imagined every visitor looking back on it with delight. But one element of the wedding was particularly noteworthy. Rosemary orchestrated a memorable surprise by arriving in a helicopter. Her dream had been to descend from the sky like a vision, to make an entrance that would be remembered. She worked with pilot Peterson Pinheiro to arrange for a Robinson R-44, a light commercial helicopter, while keeping this information confidential. Just 6 people were aware of the plan, including her brother Silvano Silva and photographer Nayla Cristina Neves, who was supposed to document the event. Rosemary couldn't sleep on the morning of her wedding because she was so excited. As the stylists meticulously worked on her hair and makeup, she was greeted with smiles and congrats at the beauty salon. She continued to visualize her spectacular arrival, descending from above and witnessing the wonder on her guests' faces. She had been thinking about this vision for months. She was aware that the day's high point would be this surprise. Rosemary arrived at a nearby town by 2 p.m., wearing her white wedding gown, to catch the helicopter's departure. She was accompanied by her 40-year-old brother Silvano, who had always been her rock. He couldn't refuse his sister's wish, even though he, like many members of their family, was nervous about the flight. They were joined by photographer Nayla, who was expecting a child and was prepared to capture every happy moment. The helicopter took off at 3:30 p.m. The flight went smoothly at first. In anticipation of seeing her fiancé and their guests, Rosemary sat next to her brother, smiling and holding his hand. Nayla made sure that every look and smile would be preserved in their wedding album by filming it all. However, things soon changed. The weather started to get worse. The air inside the helicopter became tense as clouds began to gather, then fog and rain. The pilot had to use instruments to guide him through the thick fog as visibility was fading. Already nervous about flying, Silvano displayed obvious signs of anxiety as he tightly grasped Rosemary's hand while she attempted to reassure him. The photographer Nayla continued to record, but her camera trembled every now and then, revealing the tension that had gripped everyone on board. The pilot approached the venue and tried to find a safe landing spot by descending, but the maneuver became dangerous due to the poor visibility. An uncontrollable descent was caused when the helicopter's tail abruptly clipped a tree. The helicopter crashed and caught fire just over a mile from the wedding location. Those involved in Rosemary's surprise plan started to feel apprehensive as time passed. The wedding coordinator, Carlos Eduardo, who had assisted in planning the flight, called the helicopter company to inquire about its progress. He was informed that the flight had left on time and ought to have reached its destination by now. His concern was heightened by this response, which led him to attempt speaking with the pilot directly. Not a single call was answered. When the phone rang and no one answered, Carlos and the other organizers frantically looked for other ways to find out where the helicopter was. Employees of the company also made unsuccessful attempts to contact the pilot. Meanwhile, as the guests became aware of Carlos's nervous manner, whispers and concerned looks began to circulate among them. The air became heavy with uneasiness, but nobody wanted to cause alarm. Anxious waiting gave way to growing panic after another 15 minutes. In an attempt to learn whether there had been any reports of an incident in the area, the organizers made the decision to contact the local authorities. At that point, they learned of a helicopter crash near the wedding site, which confirmed their worst suspicions. The fact that it was the same flight that was carrying Rosemere was not confirmed, but the information was enough to chill everyone. Carlos Eduardo confided in the pastor because he wasn't sure how to tell the groom. They went together to Uterly and told him what they knew. A few miles away, there had been a report of a potential helicopter crash. Uterly initially found it difficult to understand. He was unaware that Rosemere would be arriving by helicopter. The pastor kindly clarified that Rosemere had planned a surprise for both him and the guests. However, the words didn't seem to make sense. As the realization dawned, Uterly stood in stunned silence, staring at Carlos Eduardo and the pastor. His surroundings appeared to dim, the noises of the assembly fading into a quiet emptiness. When the gravity of the situation became apparent, everyone's eyes were on him. That helicopter might have contained Rosemere. The ensuing silence seemed to go on forever, and nobody knew how to respond. Reports verified that emergency personnel arrived at the scene of the collision within minutes. At first, there were few specifics as they tried to evaluate the situation. To keep spectators out, police surrounded the area and started their investigation. As news of the crash spread to the wedding location, the guests' anxiety grew more intense by the second, though everyone could feel that the possibility of a positive outcome was dwindling. One of the event organizers suggested waiting for official confirmation before drawing any conclusions. Behind him, the groom could hear whispers among the guests, and he knew that until the specifics were known, no one would tell the truth. Whispers were spreading like wildfire, and the day that was supposed to be a celebration was gradually devolving into chaos. First responders were already working diligently at the crash site, while the guests anxiously waited at the venue. The helicopter had crashed near a highway in a forested area. The fuselage had caught fire upon impact, and the remaining portion of the aircraft was rapidly consumed by the flames. After battling to keep the fire contained, firefighters eventually made it to the wreckage. Those attempting to piece together what had happened were struck with a sense of dread and grief when it became evident that none of the passengers had survived. In order to determine the cause of the collision, police officers started gathering evidence and searching the scene for hints. One officer found a camera that had continued to record even after the impact, and debris was strewn all over a small space. The video might offer important new information about the last few seconds of the flight. However, the cause of the tragedy was still unknown. The hope for a miracle was dashed when the wedding venue received official confirmation of the crash. With a heavy heart, the pastor went to Uterly and delivered the heartbreaking news. The groom's face was marked with pain as he tried to make sense of what he was hearing. Those who were by his side were left in stunned silence, unsure of how to react to such overwhelming grief, as the world seemed to crumble around him in that moment. Unsure of what to say or do, the guests who had come to celebrate love and happiness now stood in stunned silence. The ceremony, which had been eagerly awaited, had instead turned into a scene of shock and grief. What had been supposed to be a lovely day had turned into a sobering reminder of how easily one mistake or unanticipated circumstance could ruin lives and plans in an instant. Brazilian National Civil Aviation Agency investigators started collecting witness statements and analyzing the flight data. Particularly interested were those who had been to the wedding or knew about Rosemere's intentions. In addition to determining the technical causes of the crash, the investigation sought to understand why she chose to arrive at such a high risk. Police and aviation safety specialists carefully inspected the wreckage. Retrieving the flight data and going over recordings that might offer important insights was one of their first tasks. It was crucial to figure out why the helicopter lost control and veered off course. There were several possible causes, including pilot error or mechanical failure, in addition to the possibility of heavy fog and deteriorating weather. The investigation was further complicated by witness statements from people who knew the pilot, Peterson Pinheiro. Pinheiro was a seasoned and well-respected expert who was renowned for managing each flight with care and responsibility. He had years of experience and had flown numerous times in difficult weather conditions. Before taking off, he carefully considered the risks, according to his colleagues. Those who worked with him found the news of the crash even more confusing because of this background. It was difficult for many to accept that he could have made such a serious error, but the facts were still indisputable. The helicopter had clipped a tree and spun out of control in dense fog and rain. In order to ascertain whether there had been a chance for a safe landing, investigators tried to piece together the last moments of the flight. The families of Rosemere and Udary were left to deal with unspeakable grief while investigators worked at the crash site. Close friends, parents, and siblings found it difficult to believe that this tragedy had truly happened. One of the few people who was aware of Rosemere's intention to arrive by helicopter, her sister, recalled their conversations. The idea of surprising everyone with her entrance had filled Rosemere with excitement and enthusiasm. However, nobody could have predicted that this would be her last flight. Udary stood by the wedding arch, still reeling from the loss. He witnessed organizers and attendees attempting to console one another, but it did not bring him any comfort. He was troubled by the fact that he had been unaware of Rosemere's surprise. He believed that by failing to protect her, he had let her down. What ought to have been the start of their life together had instead turned into one of his worst memories. Soon after, investigators published an initial report confirming that the weather was a major factor in the collision. Visibility was severely limited due to the thick fog the helicopter had encountered. Pilot Peterson lost control of the aircraft and caused the tragic crash after attempting an emergency landing and clipping a tree with the aircraft's tail. But the inquiry was far from finished. Determining why the pilot was unable to prevent the collision and why the helicopter was flying at such a low altitude was crucial. Experts started analyzing the footage from the camera discovered among the wreckage because it might contain important hints for reconstructing the last moments of the flight. Even though it was painful, this step was essential to comprehending what had transpired in those final moments. An eerie silence descended upon the venue as the guests gradually started to depart. Nobody was strong enough to speak. While Udary's friends and family provided him with as much support as they could, the organizers worked to coordinate with the local authorities. But everyone was plagued by unanswered questions. Why did this happen? What might have led to such a disastrous result? Rosemere's family was also in shock and finding it difficult to accept what had happened. Her mother, who had always been her staunchest ally, was unable to believe that their morning chat would be their final one. She remembered how excitedly Rosemere had described her plan as a gift from the heavens that would astound everyone. Nobody could have predicted that her dream would become such a nightmare. Soon, fresh worries about the flight's actual safety surfaced. Investigators found that the helicopter lacked charter service authorization. Only private flights were allowed under its license. For what reason had the business consented to supply it for the wedding? Who was in charge of failing to notice the weather? These queries sparked additional research and became the main focus of the study. Some witnesses started to remember that bad weather had been predicted in the days before the wedding. However, these warnings received little attention. These circumstances would have needed to be taken into account by pilot Peterson Pinheiro, who is renowned for his meticulous attention to safety. The flight was nevertheless authorized. Who ultimately decided to go ahead with the flight in spite of the obvious risks was now the focus of the investigation. Udary was trying to think, and every second of waiting was painful. Rosemere had filled his life with so much warmth and light that he couldn't fathom living without her. It was believed that their journey, which began with timid looks at church, would lead to a happy life together. It felt broken now, like a picture that would never be complete. A thick silence fell over the hall, which had once been intended to reverberate with wedding music and exuberant speeches. All that was audible were quiet sobs, consoling words, and reassuring hugs. Nobody knew how to comfort a man who had just lost everything he held dear, or what to say to Udary. The helicopter crash that killed Rosemere, her brother Silvano, photographer Nayla, and pilot Peterson left a lasting scar on the hearts of their families and the community at large. even though the investigation went on for weeks. As more information became available, one emotion remained constant among those who knew the victims: a deep sense of injustice and loss. The Brazilian National Civil Aviation Agency finished its report a month after the tragic incident. It was verified that the severe weather and poor visibility were the main causes of the collision. When the helicopter lost control at a low altitude, pilot Peterson Pinheiro was in a dire situation after trying to navigate through heavy fog and rain. The collision with a tree, which resulted in the fatal crash, was the crucial moment. Additionally, the report disclosed that Rosemere's helicopter lacked authorization for charter flights. Its registration only allowed for private use, and it was against safety rules to let it be used for a wedding. In addition to drawing attention to the company that rented out the helicopter, this revelation infuriated the relatives of the victims. Subsequent analysis revealed that the helicopter's leasing company had neglected to adequately evaluate the weather and permitted the flight to continue in spite of warnings of poor visibility. After the investigation was finished, the company and its owners were the target of multiple lawsuits because this was considered a serious breach. The relatives of the victims wanted to know why the flight had been authorized in these circumstances and who was responsible for the cancellation. The pilot independently assessed that the flight could be conducted safely, according to the helicopter company. More investigation was necessary, though, after it was discovered that the business lacked permission to use the aircraft for commercial purposes. Their licenses were temporarily suspended as a result, and a thorough audit of their business practices was conducted. The families of Rosemere and the other victims got ready for the funerals while the investigation continued. None of them wanted to confront that moment. Seeing dreams dashed is one thing, but accepting the loss of loved ones is quite another. Hundreds of people came to pay their respects at the solemn funeral. Tears and silence conveyed more than words could ever convey. Unable to express his sorrow, Udurley stood by Rosemere's coffin. His spirit appeared hardened by the weight of his grief, and his eyes were hollow. He had dreamed of being with Rosemere all his life, but in a flash everything was different. He thought his heart might burst as he stood in front of her coffin. He was unable to accept that this was really the end, and couldn't say goodbye. Following the funeral, Rosemere's friends and family started a campaign to call for more safety regulations in private aviation. They hoped that no one else would ever experience such a terrible loss as a result of carelessness or oversight. This tragedy struck a chord with the public, leading to broad support for more stringent laws and mandatory supervision to guarantee adherence to flight safety standards. Their local church, which they frequently visited, honored Rosemere's memory as well as that of her brother and the other victims. Udurley made the decision to preserve their legacy in spite of his suffering, in order to provide families impacted by comparable tragedies with tools to deal with their loss. He set up a small fund. Investigators published their final report after several months. It verified that bad weather and poor visibility, which caused the loss of control, were the primary causes of the tragedy. The company's failure to appropriately evaluate the risks involved and adhere to appropriate rental procedures was one contributing factor. The company's flight licenses were temporarily revoked and fined until all found flaws were fixed. Even though the investigation yielded a lot of answers, it was unable to restore the lost. Families were compensated, but it didn't make their grief any less painful. It was only a symbolic gesture that Udurley and everyone who knew Rosemere could not reverse. Life gradually returned to normal for most people months after the tragedy, but not for Udurley. The spark that used to light his eyes had vanished, but he still went to work and saw friends. Nothing could fill the void Rosemere's passing left in his heart. He frequently found himself thinking back on their happy times together in the evenings and wishing that day had gone differently. What started out as a dream for an amazing surprise showed how fleeting life is and how one bad choice can alter everything. Tragically, Rosemere's wedding day was not what she had hoped for, but it was still memorable. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Nobody could have guessed that the couple had sinister secrets. She was an accomplished judge, and he was a successful lawyer. But a terrible thing happened. What began as a tale of love turned into an unimaginable tragedy. The Circuit House colony was quiet on a typical Kanpur evening. However, a mystery that would soon upend the life of Pratibha Gautam, a respected judge who had only moved to the neighborhood a few months earlier, was hidden behind the walls of one apartment in a government-provided residence. Pratibha, a civil judge at the local court, was renowned for her honesty and equity. She had gained the respect of her neighbors and the confidence of her co-workers by being modest but resolute. Before one fateful evening altered everything, it appeared that nothing could disrupt the rhythm of her life. Manu Abhishek Rajan, her husband and a lawyer, started a lengthy journey from Delhi to Kanpur on October 8, 2016. Despite their undeniable love, the couple's relationship was strained by the demands of their careers, and they had only been married for less than a year. While working at the Tis Hazari court in Delhi, Abhishek often stayed behind to spend as much time as possible with his wife. As he drove this evening, he thought about their reunion and looked forward to the weekend they would spend together. Despite the long drive, Abhishek, who was used to such trips, made every effort to communicate with his wife. He tried calling her several times, but no one picked up. He initially thought she was working or enjoying some well-earned relaxation, but he became more uneasy as he approached Kanpur. Why didn't she answer? Why is there no sound? When the first light filled Kanpur's streets on the morning of October 9, Abhishek finally made it to the Circuit House colony and parked outside their apartment. He tried calling her again, but the silence on the other end made him even more worried. As he caught his breath, he hurried to the door after getting out of his car and pressed the doorbell. However, there was only a spooky silence within. Again and again he rang, then knocked, softly at first, then more urgently as panic set in. Since the door was locked from the inside, Pratibha ought to be at home. Abhishek became aware that something was seriously amiss. He made the tough choice to break in with a heavy heart. The door flew open after a series of hard blows. The lock gave way, and Abhishek stepped inside while holding his breath. He was paralyzed by what he saw in the living room. His wife was hanging from the ceiling fan. The air was heavy with an unpleasant smell. Her skin was darkened with dried blood, and her wrists were cut. Abhishek's entire world fell apart in that moment. Everything else became inconsequential. He walked cautiously toward her. The rope gave way when he touched her, and Pratibha's body dropped to the ground. Fear and sadness tightened his chest. He stood over her, finding it difficult to believe what he was seeing. Then, as if in a daze, he knew he had to do something. Ignoring the neighbors' shocked looks, Abhishek ran out of the apartment. He got into his vehicle and drove quickly in the direction of Kanpur Kant, the closest police station. With a trembling voice, he reported that his wife had probably committed suicide. The officer sent a team to the scene right away after listening carefully without interjecting. This signaled the start of an inquiry aimed at answering the numerous mysteries surrounding Pratibha Gautam's last hours. What had become of this powerful woman? Why had her life ended in such a terrible way? There was a spooky silence in the Circuit House colony as officers pushed their way into the apartment. They were shocked by the scene at once. The body on the ground was different from what Abhishek had first said. He claimed to have discovered his wife hanging from the ceiling fan. He clarified that he had taken her down in an attempt to assist in his panic. However, the bloodstains on the furniture and floor only strengthened their suspicions, and this particular detail raised more questions. Senior officers and forensic specialists soon showed up to start gathering evidence. While Abhishek watched, his hands shaking and his face displaying a mixture of shock and fear, they took pictures and collected tangible evidence. Neighbors were beginning to congregate outside, whispering and glancing nervously at each other about what might have happened in the judge's house. The small Uttar Pradeshi town of Orai is where Pratibha Gautam was born. Her mother taught her and her younger sister to be independent and persistent, and she grew up in a middle-class family with a father who worked at a bank. Early on, Pratibha showed an interest in law, and she relocated to Lucknow to attend university after high school. There, she not only graduated with honors, but also made the decision to become a lawyer. Her desire to become a judge eventually led her to Delhi, where she enrolled in graduate school. The pivotal moment in her life occurred in Delhi. She met Manu Abhishek Rajan, a young, ambitious lawyer who shared her desire for career advancement. Abhishek was born into a powerful family. His father, Judge Suresh Chandra Rajan, had a long career that included positions at the CBI and NGT, among other prestigious organizations. What started out as straightforward discussions between Pratibha and Abhishek regarding exam stress and career obstacles quickly developed into something more. Through long walks around the city, study sessions, and library visits, their friendship developed into a romantic partnership, and they soon made the decision to get married. But not everything went as planned. When Pratibha informed her parents that she intended to wed Abhishek, they reacted negatively. Since Abhishek was only an attorney, they felt that he was unfit to be their daughter's partner and that their daughter should have a higher status. Their objections were exacerbated by the caste differences. Nevertheless, the couple decided to fight for their future together because their love was stronger than what society expected. They both made the decision to apply for the junior judge exam in 2013. Pratibha gave her all to the preparation, attending specialized classes, studying at night, and taking practice exams. Her diligence paid off. She started training after passing the competitive exam. Sadly, Abhishek failed the test. Although it was a major setback, he decided to keep going and pursue a career in law, concentrating on criminal cases. They continued to have a solid relationship in spite of the disappointment. Pratibha Gautam began working as an associate civil judge in Kanpur in 2015. She soon proved she was capable of handling the responsibilities and demands of the position, which called for complete dedication. She quickly gained the respect of her peers in the local court due to her fairness and strong work ethic. Abhishek Rajan, meanwhile, pursued his legal career at Delhi's Tis Hazari Court, where his professionalism and tenacity won praise from peers. On January 29, 2016, they took a risky move. They got married in secret at Delhi's Arya Samaj temple. This was a planned move to take charge of their future rather than an act of impulsive behavior. They chose not to tell them since they were aware that neither family would be happy about their union. Only a few close friends who assisted in planning the event attended the low-key ceremony. They kept their marriage a secret from their families until shortly after it was formally registered. The couple made an effort to patch things up with their family after the wedding. Pratibha was eventually accepted as a daughter-in-law by Abhishek's family, who also showed interest in her life. Pratibha's family, however, was adamant in their disapproval. They were unable to forgive her for selecting a partner whose background and status they considered inappropriate. 2 months after the wedding, on April 23rd, Pratibha and Abhishek announced their union with a reception in Delhi. The celebration was lively and joyful, but it was clouded by Pratibha's parents' absence. It wasn't until after the wedding that her parents learned about it. They refused to accept Pratibha's decision and remained aloof, despite her repeated attempts to make amends. Pratibha found this difficult and hoped that their feelings would eventually soften, but that time never arrived. Abhishek and Pratibha ultimately made the decision to relocate to Kanpur. In the respectable Circuit House colony, Pratibha was given government housing. They made this their new home, a peaceful and safe haven where they could put their careers first and avoid family conflicts. After a few months in Kanpur, Abhishek went back to Delhi to carry on with his work. It was 6 months into their marriage. They continued to support one another, stay in close communication, and get together whenever they could in spite of the obstacles, distance, family strife, and the pressure of their demanding careers. Pratibha and Abhishek treasured every second they had together, planning, dreaming, and having faith that their love would triumph over all challenges. When Abhishek got to Kanpur early on October 9 to see Pratibha, he discovered her dead in their apartment. Given that Pratibha was a judge and the police unit arrived quickly, her death was not only a personal tragedy, but also a challenge to the system as a whole. Officers started going through the apartment very carefully and recording any possible evidence. Beside Pratibha's body was the scarf that had been around her neck. Investigators had a lot of questions about the cuts on her arms. Why did the scene seem so strange? And what had actually happened in that room? Shaking from shock and sorrow, Abhishek gave his first statement, explaining how he had discovered Pratibha. She was suspended when he walked in, he said, and he pulled her down until her body hit the floor. Even a preliminary review seemed extremely suspicious, but the police in this case ordered a forensic examination to ascertain the precise cause and time of death. Suspension and wrist cuts, together as a means of self-harm, didn't seem likely. Details that weren't consistent with typical cases were observed by investigators. 3 separate marks in a linear pattern indicated intentional force, and the neck injuries were deep. An O-shaped mark left by the scarf was a noticeable detail in most suspension cases. Although the neck mark typically takes the shape of a V or U, a circular mark might suggest that the patient was compressed while they were in a supine position. The idea that the scene was staged to imply self-harm was raised by this discovery. The 14 deep cuts on Pratibha's arms, 6 on the right and 8 on the left, told a different tale. The cuts were parallel and exact, as if they had been made carefully and without hurry. The police had reason to question the situation's simplicity because this did not fit the typical profile. But the tragedy's news spread swiftly. Camera crews and reporters started congregating outside Pratibha's house. When he heard of her death, her father was devastated. He was so distraught and perplexed by what might have happened to their daughter that he and his wife left right away for Kanpur. A local hospital took Pratibha's body for an autopsy, but there were problems with the procedure. Colleagues and community members criticized the temporary transportation of a judge's body. Her body was left in a corner of the hallway until the examination could start, which sparked criticism from the public and raised concerns about how the police handled the case. Late at night, medical professionals conducted the autopsy and attempted to solve the tragic and intricate puzzle. Abhishek frequently described how he discovered his wife in that depressing condition, but it became evident that something was amiss when the forensic team showed up. He brought up the ceiling fan, which was questioned. He claimed that even though Pratibha had been suspended from it, the mystery was only made more complex by the bloodstains on the fan blade. The smudges were long, as though her arms had simply touched the blades, devoid of the typical patterns of spatter that accompany physical injury. The scene looked too neat, too perfect. There were questions about the ceiling fan itself. It was obviously not strong enough to bear an adult's weight. There were no indications of bending or damage, which would have been expected from a real attempt to use it. Investigators were beginning to suspect a problem. Abhishek claimed that in order to enter the apartment, he had broken down the door. "I have to force it open," he insisted. Investigators soon discovered, though, that the lock was merely minor damage and was still operational. He claimed a forced entry, but the door opened and closed without any problems. It wouldn't have worked so well if it had been disassembled. The police's suspicions of Abhishek were strengthened by this detail. The physical evidence didn't seem to support his version of events. The lead officer concentrated on getting all the details straight during the interrogation. Abhishek meticulously detailed his journey from Delhi, including every stop and piece of evidence, including his call logs, toll receipts, and surveillance footage. He said that during his journey, he made several calls to Pratibha. It seemed suspicious that he provided so much information without much prodding, as if he had foreseen the questions and had prepared his responses beforehand. The police demanded that Abhishek stay for additional interrogation, despite his repeated requests to be released, claiming that he had done everything in his power to aid the investigation. Being an accomplished attorney, he was aware that there might be many details at the crime scene that could be important, and his in-depth familiarity with these details made his story seem too polished and well-rehearsed. But when investigators learned that Abhishek did not call the police right away after finding Pratibha, the real questions started to come to light. The police station was a mile or two from the apartment, so he got in his car and drove there instead. Most people would automatically contact emergency services right away in such a circumstance, but Abhishek would not. He clarified that he wasn't sure what to do and was in shock and confusion. Although he only went to the station once, he said he had attempted to get help twice. Investigators thought they were dealing with something much more complicated than it initially seemed because of the contradictions, strange details, and disparities in his story. Even with his assured answers, Abhishek was beginning to come across as someone who knew the answers to every question, but the reality of what actually transpired on that fateful day was still unknown. Investigators understood that Abhishek might hold the secret to solving the case, and that the solution was still a ways off. Security kept a close eye on everything that took place in this residential colony. It had security posts and guarded entrances, and was inhabited by senior government officials. But Abhishek didn't ask the guards for assistance when he realized the apartment door wouldn't open. Why not? Investigators were immediately drawn to this question, because anyone else in a similar circumstance would probably turn to those around them for help. In addition to the increasing number of troubling details regarding his behavior, this lack of action seemed suspicious. When he drove to the police station after locating Pratibha, another odd detail surfaced, according to Abhishek. When he left, he didn't tell the guards at the colony's entrance what had happened. He could have gone up to them, which probably would have sped up the police call. Rather, he just climbed into his vehicle and left. His account was further called into question by investigators, who saw this as yet another warning sign. Pratibha's parents were horrified by what they saw when they got to the scene. Their sorrow soon gave way to rage. They publicly charged Abhishek and his family with being behind her death. They said Abhishek had made her living conditions intolerable, put her under continual pressure, and limited her ability to communicate with her family. In order to substantiate their allegations, Pratibha's father submitted a report to the police asking that Abhishek be charged with coercion and causing harm. Either Abhishek was directly responsible for her death, he claimed, or his actions had caused her to die this way. As a judge, Pratibha was a successful and self-reliant woman who was used to running her own affairs. For 6 years, she had been independent. Her family found it hard to accept that she would voluntarily hurt herself. She had never displayed any signs of distress or malice, they remembered. This made one wonder, what might have motivated her to do this? 4 seasoned medical professionals performed the autopsy on the evening of October 9 and came up with startling results. Asphyxiation was the cause of death, which suggests foul play. Her body had marks that suggested she had been struck by a metal object. In addition, she had 3 deep cuts on her neck and 14 cuts on her arms and wrists. Everything pointed to a struggle, a last-ditch effort to resist. The most unexpected discovery made about Pratibha before her death was that she was 3.5 months pregnant. The investigation was further complicated by this detail. How could a pregnant woman who was in a responsible role at work choose to hurt herself? The presence of bruises and other marks didn't fit the scenario where she may have caused the injuries and suffocated herself. Why did her body show so many signs of damage? Abhishek started to exhibit signs of discomfort as the questioning went on. His answers, which had been confident, became uncertain. Investigators took notice of his hesitation and self-contradiction. He might be concealing something, and these were obvious clues. He was eventually arrested for additional interrogation. The police were aware that this case needed to be handled carefully. Abhishek practiced law. His brother-in-law was a prominent figure in the judiciary, as was his father, a retired judge. Any mistake could have dire consequences. Public pressure and his family's influence were major factors when Abhishek appeared in court to set bail terms. The judge restricted his confinement to 7 hours rather than the usual amount of time. Investigators and Pratibha's family members were not happy with this decision, because they thought Abhishek was treated too lightly, considering the seriousness of the charges. Pratibha's body was given to her family after the autopsy was finished. Her parents, siblings, and other family members were devastated. They remembered how Pratibha had sounded quiet when she called home in recent months. She avoided talking about her personal life and shared few details, and now all those little clues seemed like warning signs they might have missed. The case became more complicated every day, and the solutions appeared farther off. After seizing Abhishek's phone, the police started going through all of his emails, calls, and messages. They found that during the past few months their relationship had becoming more tense. Nearly every message from Abhishek was tinged with annoyance, and they frequently argued about their plans for the family and the future of their child. Although no one was yet certain of the extent to which these sinister undertones would spread, this increased the investigators' suspicions. Abhishek had to endure hours of interrogation while the investigators watched him. With every new question and piece of evidence, the pressure increased and his burden grew heavier. Abhishek finally broke down and said the words that changed everything one day. When he was so tired and on the verge of an emotional collapse, he admitted it. The words were a painful, unwilling admission that came reluctantly, as if drawn from deep within. It was shocking and horrifying to hear him admit his part in Pratibha's demise. Abhishek disclosed that his thoughts and feelings were distorted by years of internalized jealousy and resentment. It all began when he failed the exam and continued to practice law, while Pratibha earned her place as a judge. This status difference turned into a major source of internal conflict. He found it hard to believe that his wife had accomplished more than he had, and that her family publicly disapproved of him. His emotions became more destructive with every day that went by. Then she found out she was pregnant. It represented their love and their hope for the future for Pratibha. She thought the baby would improve her relationship with her parents and strengthen their marriage. Pratibha's mother was ecstatic and intended to help her daughter, even meeting to talk about their future together. However, this news felt like yet another setback for Abhishek. He experienced fear and a greater sense of alienation in place of happiness. He saw the pregnancy as a further erosion of his independence, an increase in his responsibilities, and a widening of the gap between him and Pratibha. Abhishek's friends knew him as someone who liked to live a carefree life. He was known for his parties, independence, and lack of responsibility. Now, he was overcome with fear at the thought of becoming a father. He started to coerce Pratibha into thinking about getting an abortion, but she adamantly refused. The tension between them only grew as a result of her unwavering desire to keep the child. He became increasingly frustrated with her every time she smiled and tried to show him that their future might be promising. He was stuck. The situation only got worse. Abhishek began to have even more influence over Pratibha's life. He cut off her communication with her parents and grew more and more envious of her achievements and career. At home, Pratibha's world was dominated by control and anxiety, despite her independence and success at work. The turning point came when Pratibha's mother said she wanted to see her in early October. Abhishek's response was furious. The fact that Pratibha had disregarded him and contacted her family was too much for him to handle. He insisted that she cease all correspondence, but Pratibha refused to back down. She vowed to stand up for her rights, keep her child, and refuse to compromise. For Abhishek, those words were the last straw. His fear of losing control, his sense of failure, and his jealousy all came to a head. Her strength and independence were too much for him to handle anymore. On that fateful day, things got out of hand. Now that he was seated across from the investigators, Abhishek talked about his anxieties, his overwhelming jealousy, and how he couldn't tolerate her independence and success. The investigators, however, believed there was more to the story even after his admission. The deeper secrets of their relationship had not yet been revealed, and it appeared likely that Abhishek had only told a portion of the truth. Things started out quickly and unexpectedly when Pratibha told Abhishek she was going to Delhi, in spite of his strong protests. On October 7, Abhishek was at a resort unwinding with friends. He was startled by the news. He made the decision to go back to Delhi right away. He left his friends behind, gave up his break, and went home. Pratibha reached Delhi by train on October 8th. In the hopes that a face-to-face discussion would improve their relationship, she was met by an irate and agitated Abhishek. He loaded her into the car, and as they drove, the tension increased and turned into a furious dispute. Shouting broke out during the exchange, and Pratibha finally had enough. Declaring she was going back to Kanpur, she got out of the car in the middle of the road and started to walk away. Abhishek's eyes were burning with rage as he watched her. "Do as you please," he yelled after her. However, his feelings overcame him after a short while, and he chose to follow her. It took Abhishek about 9 hours to drive to Kanpur during the night and arrive at Pratibha's apartment in the posh Circuit House colony. On the morning of October 9, it was around 5 or 5:30 in the morning. Since most neighbors kept to themselves and the colony was known for its security, he had some leeway to act undetected. The tension that had grown over the previous few months exploded when Abhishek walked into the apartment. He started slapping a stick at Pratibha. She tried to stop him, but he persisted. As the blows did not satisfy his rage, he cut her arms, body, and neck with a blade. Despite her best efforts, Pratibha lost consciousness and fell to the ground. Abhishek intensified his actions upon realizing she was still alive. He reached for a scarf, pulled it tight around her neck, and held it there until she exhaled. Breathless, standing over her, he started to realize the seriousness of his actions. He needed to hide his tracks now. He tried to hang Pratibha from the ceiling fan to make it appear as though she had committed suicide, but the fan was not strong enough to support the weight. It looked like it might shatter. Abhishek left her body on the ground after realizing that this plan would fail. Knowing that it might expose his intentions and motivations, he swiftly looked around the apartment for anything that might implicate him and took Pratibha's phone. Trying not to draw attention, he left the apartment at around 6 in the morning and made his way to his car before leaving the Circuit House neighborhood. However, he did not immediately call the police. Rather, Abhishek paused on a calm Kanpur street to collect his thoughts and prepare his statement to the authorities. Every detail would be important, he knew. He didn't visit the Kanpur Cant police station until 3 hours later. At approximately 9 in the morning, he claimed to have discovered Pratibha dead in the apartment when he reported her death there. Inconsistencies in his behavior were immediately observed by the police. Why hadn't he reported the incident sooner? Why hadn't he gotten help right away, rather than taking some time to think about what to do next? The investigators were particularly interested in these questions. Abhishek was taken into custody for additional interrogation after making his initial statement. The police started a thorough investigation of the crime scene in the meantime. The scarf that was used to kill Pratibha was discovered, but the blade that was used to injure her was gone. Suspicions increased as a result. Abhishek had obviously tried to conceal evidence and mislead the investigation, indicating that a comprehensive and intricate investigation would be necessary to find the truth. Abhishek put Pratibha's driver and housekeeper on leave the day before the incident, which at first glance appeared to be a random coincidence, but turned out to be a component of his scheme. Following Abhishek's arrest, his parents promptly fled, evading all police requests. After taking notice, the court ordered the seizure of their assets and issued an arrest warrant for them, pending their appearance for interrogation. Abhishek's parents appealed to the Supreme Court in an effort to defend themselves. They were successful in getting the warrant temporarily stayed, but on October 18, the court in Kanpur ordered their voluntary surrender. To cooperate with the current investigation, Abhishek's parents showed up at the Chief Magistrate's court. Abhishek, meanwhile, tried several times to get bail. He filed petitions with the Supreme Court, the High Court, and the Session Court, among other courts. But every request was turned down. He could not be released due to the seriousness of the charges and the possible danger to the investigation. After several years, Abhishek had been incarcerated for almost 5 years by 2022. After a protracted legal battle and multiple appeals and counter-motions, the High Court finally granted him bail in April 2022, but this was only a short-term solution. The case was still being reviewed, and a verdict has not yet been rendered. Despite all of their efforts, Abhishek's family persisted in demanding his exoneration, while the police and prosecutors persisted in their attempts to establish his guilt. Both parties are still engaged in a fight for justice, while the investigation continues, and the final ruling is still pending. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Residing in the dying neighborhood. Generally speaking, those who haven't moved in a long time know their neighbors well. They are aware of whom to avoid and to what degree, as well as whom to trust. After years of cohabitation, neighbors can occasionally get closer than certain family members. When the family is traveling or on vacation, they are expected to take care of the house and property. Without thinking twice, they invite each other over and let their kids eat delicacies from these people. On occasion, though, the longtime neighbor may prove to be a true madman who has been waiting for the proper opportunity. In recent years, the Diana Garnica case has grown to be one of Argentina's most dramatic. The inquiry took a great deal of time and effort, and the culprit might have avoided punishment because the victim's body was never located. There was hardly any direct proof against him, and he refused to acknowledge his guilt. Who was the family of Diana Garnica? Early life. On March 3, 2000, Diana Abigail Garnica Cisneros was born in the town of Villa Mariano Moreno El Calvanar, Argentina, in the province of Tucumán. Being the youngest daughter and the seventh and second-to-last child of her parents, she grew up in a huge, impoverished family. Her parents, Elizabeth Susana Cisneros and Ramon Garnica, put a lot of effort into providing for their numerous children and making their homes at least passably comfortable. Diana, the family's youngest girl, was adored by all. Her older siblings looked after her, and her parents loved her. She performed well academically, had a gift for sketching and a love of dancing from an early age. She was very close to her elder sister Sonia, who basically looked for her upbringing while their parents were at work, and she was exceptionally smart and reasonable for her age. She also never lied to her family and had no secrets from her parents. Due to the Garnica family's strong religious beliefs, the parents and kids routinely went to church and made an effort to live morally upright lives. In order to assist their parents to some extent, the elder kids also started working when they were teenagers. Each of the younger ones had their own duties and was responsible for keeping the house in order. Diana always wanted to help others around her, thus she dreamed of becoming a doctor, was incredibly responsive, friendly, and sensitive. She stated that she would purchase her parents a large home so that her mother could create the flower garden and fruit trees she had always imagined, and she intended to establish a prosperous career to support her family. Unfortunately, relocating to a different city would never allow these dreams to come true. Following Ramon's job loss due to deteriorating financial difficulties, the parents divorced in 2013. The family was compelled to relocate to Juan Bautista Alberti, which is in the same province as Tucumán. They found the transfer to be quite challenging, and at first their issues only got worse. After more than 20 years of marriage, the couple's relationship rapidly soured. After they started fighting all the time, they finally came to the conclusion that they could no longer be together. All of the children were shocked by the divorce, but the youngest ones were most affected. When Diana found out what had happened, she was devastated. A 13-year-old girl's world fell apart in a second, and she was unable to comprehend what would happen next. The father continued to provide for his ex-wife and kids in spite of their split, but he soon had another family. Elizabeth also suffered a great deal as a result of the divorce, but she was fortunate to find a good profession that paid well for the area, and her kids helped to support her. The family gradually adjusted to their new situation, became comfortable in their new house, formed friendships, and built strong bonds with the locals. A Dario named Javier Suarez resided across from the Garnica family. He was a 36-year-old man who was incredibly nice, amiable, and lovely. He was raising 4 children with his spouse, Yasmina Alejandra Villarreal. In addition, he had 1 unmarried child and 2 children from prior marriages. Notably, the Garnicas only lived in Juan Bautista Alberti for 6 months after Dario and his family relocated there. Since they were new to the neighborhood, maybe that's why they became fast friends so quickly. Suarez had previously resided in the northern Argentine province of Santiago del Estero. Dario worked at a brick factory in the area alongside his wife, 2 brothers, and a few other family members, moved within a mile of their residence. Diana and her siblings were almost the same age as his kids. They became friends, as they soon discovered they had things in common while attending the same school. Additionally, the grown-ups got along well, letting their kids come and stay together, celebrating family occasions and growing close to one another. During their first job and adolescent relationship, Sonia and Diana even took care of the smallest neighbor's kids while their parents were at work. Ramon helped his ex-wife and older children as much as he could after the divorce, but he almost stopped sending money after he had a new family. Despite offering a steady salary, the mother's job was woefully inadequate to support a large family. Even a tiny business that produced and sold their own baked goods was launched by the family, but it failed very fast. The situation got so bad that Diana had to quit school in her senior year in order to work and support her mother. In order to take care of an elderly, sick person, the 16-year-old girl accepted a job as a caretaker. Garnica believed that this experience would help her in her future career as a doctor. Even though she was young, she took her work very seriously and responsibly. She cooked diet-specific meals, complied with the suggestions created by the treating physician, closely followed all instructions, and kept an eye on the medication schedule. Diana enjoyed her work. She felt valuable and needed, worked hard to accomplish things correctly, and was admired for it. Even though she worked from dawn till night almost every day, she continued to dutifully go to church on Sundays with her mother and sisters. Additionally, she started dating a boy with whom they had previously attended school. The young couple would occasionally go through the park in the evenings, just chatting and spending time together. Diana, however, followed her mother's rigorous guidelines and routines. She always got home around 10 o'clock at night. She never went somewhere without telling her family where she was going, who she was going with, and when she would be back. And she never stayed out late. She occasionally accompanied her neighbors and their kids to the city market to buy supplies, although her mother was always aware of these outings. Dario looked after the neighbor's girl as if she were his own kid, spoiling her with modest presents every now and then. When the man found out she had a boyfriend, he gave her paternalist advice about how boys may be dishonest and cautioned her against letting him take advantage of her innocence and naivete. The girl, who still had no secrets from her mother, told her about this talk. Although Elizabeth thought the neighbor's behavior was a little odd, she concluded that it was his way of showing concern because he had teenage daughters who were Diana's age, which was an odd request. Late in the afternoon on May 6, 2017, Diana suddenly got a call from her neighbor, who, out of pure kindness, said he wanted to assist her family. Although Garnica was in dire need of money at the time, she was anticipating a bonus soon, which she intended to use to start fixing their home's roof, which had begun to leak during a recent downpour, and to get a dental prosthesis for her mother. But then Dario abruptly said he wanted to get Elizabeth a gift air conditioner, and he invited Diana to go with him so they could help pick one out. Because he wanted it to be a surprise and knowing would make it impossible, he requested that Diana not inform her mother about it. He arranged for a meeting spot and once more got her to swear not to tell anyone. She got this strange call right now. Diana had just gotten home from her job. She stated she needed to drop off groceries she had purchased on the way home and change her clothes once she got there, despite the neighbor's insistence that she accompany him immediately. Since her mother never lied to her or hid secrets from her, it was only natural for her to tell her everything. It also seemed strange to the woman. They were friendly with the neighbors, but this was the first time they had ever done this. Since their family did not require an air conditioner, Elizabeth wanted to call Dario herself to express her gratitude and decline the offer. Her daughter, however, persuaded her not to, stating that she would make the promised trip to the store but would turn down the pricey purchase. The girl told her mother that she would be back home before it was too late and that everything would be all right. In order to maintain the surprise, the neighbor texted Diana's phone to let her know he was already waiting for her and to ask her to keep their meeting a secret. After responding that she was leaving, Diana realized her phone was nearly dead. In order to charge it, she chose to leave it at home. The last time anyone saw her was when she met Dario at the prearranged location. An enigmatic disappearance. Elizabeth became concerned when her daughter didn't come home by nightfall, particularly because she was unable to contact her because the phone was left at home. The woman waited a bit longer, but she became anxious as night fell. She tried to comfort her mother that nothing terrible could have happened and that her sister would soon return home, after first calling her oldest daughter Sonia and telling her everything. The mother heard the neighbor's motorcycle pull up to the house across the street. As it grew pitch black, she sighed with satisfaction, thinking Dario and her daughter were back. But by 5:10, 20 minutes had gone by, and the girl was still not inside the house. The neighbor was by himself when the woman went outside. When she asked him about Diana, he was taken aback and claimed not to have seen her that day and to know nothing about her. Elizabeth was taken aback. She couldn't decide if the neighbor was telling the truth or whether her daughter had cheated on her for the first time in her life and gone somewhere else. The man persisted in telling her his story, though, and even gave her his phone to make sure he hadn't spoken to her daughter. He had, of course, erased all the messages and calls by then. Concerned about the girl's whereabouts, Dario even volunteered to drive around the area with her mother to find her and question the teenager's friends and neighbors if they had caught anything unusual. But instead of accepting his assistance, the woman chose to begin the hunt on her own. No one had seen the girl that day, but she and her older kids wandered the area until late at night, phoning all of the girl's friends and acquaintances and questioning everyone they encountered. When Elizabeth got home, she checked her daughter's phone and discovered that her daughter had not erased 2 missed calls and a message from the neighbor. The woman was so certain that Dario was lying that she called the police and her ex-husband to report their youngest daughter missing. After hearing the disturbing news, the man drove to his ex-wife's house, which was several hundred miles away, to assist in the hunt for his daughter. The horrifying scene at the brick factory and police indifference. When a concerned mother reported her daughter missing to the police station in the middle of the night, the officers did not take the case seriously, assuming the girl had either run off with her boyfriend or gone to a party with friends and would return home by morning. The authorities ignored Elizabeth's fears, stating that they would not begin a search until at least 24 hours had elapsed, despite her sharing her suspicions about the neighbor and even displaying the conversations and messages on her daughter's phone. When the Garnica family realized they were on their own, they launched a large search. The father had already come from a different city by then, and they proceeded to the neighbor's house to have a serious conversation. But the house was quiet, dark, and vacant, and when they knocked, nobody answered. After that, the family visited the brick factory where the neighbor and his family worked, when the missing girl's relatives found a horrifying discovery. As the senior member of his staff, Dario had access to the plant even when it was closed because he possessed the keys. The lights were on that night, and the girl's relatives came in to find a terrifying scene. Even though it was a day off and the facility was meant to be closed, the brick-making furnaces were operating. In addition, every adult member of the neighbor's family was there. They were obviously burning stuff in the furnaces and seemed restless. A horrible suspicion struck the Garnicas. Dario wasn't in the factory, and when they inquired about his whereabouts and the situation, those in attendance attempted to divert attention by claiming that they were performing maintenance and getting equipment ready for use, adding that the man had just arrived and may have gone to the bathroom. However, the suspect was able to covertly escape the search for evidence and the arrest of suspects by leaving the factory through the back door within the brief time that this conversation lasted. The family of the missing girls made the decision to get in touch with the prosecutor's office following the terrifying scene at the workplace and the peculiar actions of Dario's relatives. At that point, the adolescent had been missing for about 24 hours, and the inquiry was scheduled to start. It turned out, though, that the police station where the parents had reported the girl's disappearance had not provided any information. Got to them. Prosecutor Claudio Benari was incensed by this circumstance, took charge of the case personally, and vowed to discipline the police officers who had failed to perform their duty. He started by asking for a warrant to search the brick plant and Dario's house. Nevertheless, because it was Sunday and the legal system was not functioning, the prosecutor chose to handle everything himself in order to save valuable time. Benari asked his family for assistance in getting rid of the body and evidence because he thought the suspect may have attacked the adolescent, abused her, and then killed her. The fact that Dario's whole family was in the plant on their day off in the middle of the night and had mysteriously started the furnaces raised suspicions in his mind. As the family looked for the daughter, including on social media, the man's calls and messages to his young neighbor's phone also seemed odd. As soon as the case gained widespread attention, several conjectures and guesses were made. The young beauty might have been abducted and sold into slavery at a brothel or for organs, for example, according to a widely held notion. One woman even named a specific individual, but it was later discovered that she was merely attempting to get revenge on her ex-boyfriend by sending him to prison. The suspect's home was searched, but nothing was found. The crime had obviously taken place somewhere else, and he had not brought the girl there. At the brick plant, no signs were discovered either. Benari did not, however, rule out the possibility that the corpse and evidence were destroyed in a cremation using the furnaces, but they were merely conjectures and speculations. However, the prosecutor used the missing girl's phone data as a major justification to start Dario's arrest. As potential accomplices, his mother-in-law, sister, wife, brothers Cesar and Marcus, and a few other family members were also taken into custody. The defendant rejected all of the claims against him during questioning, saying he had not seen the neighbor and had not spoken to her that day. Clear disparities in their claims were found, nevertheless, based on data analysis from his phone and devices that belonged to the victim and his family. While his family members were charged with criminal conspiracy and involvement, the guy was charged with unlawful detention, potential assault, and depriving the girl of her life. While the investigation into the search for Diana was underway, all suspects were placed in jail for 3 months. Her parents remained optimistic, even though the authorities initially didn't think the missing girl would be discovered alive. They increased the number of persons that participated in the search, demanded that Dario reveal where their daughter was and what he had done to her, coordinated marches and protests, and involved the media in the investigation. In an attempt to sway the inquiry and coerce the suspect into delivering a statement, the parents desperately sought meetings with the security and justice ministers at the time. Unfortunately, this did not translate into practice, even when the highest governmental levels welcomed the family of the missing girls. Despite the efforts of more than 200 police officers, assistance dogs, and specialized tools including search drones and helicopters, the search was unsuccessful. Disturbing findings in one of the kilns at a brick plant. A second examination revealed a tooth part and an odd, heavily melted metal thing. This item was thought to be the nose piercing the missing girl had on, but to verify this, specialized forensic analysis was needed, and it would take time as law enforcement awaited the findings. The man's notebooks with highly suspicious entries were discovered after a second, more extensive search at Dario's home. It became clear from these seemingly private diaries that the man was genuinely fixated on his young neighbor. When the family moved in next door to his house, everything began. She was just 13 years old at the time. The notes made it apparent that the girl drove the suspect crazy, even though he did not write anything explicit about what he planned to do with her. For years, he thought about her every day, and occasionally wrote letters to the neighbor in which he strangely proclaimed his love. Investigators came to the conclusion, after going through all the notes, that the man's addiction only got worse with time and that he was unable to control his disgusting cravings. He implied that she would one day belong to him and that he would provide her permanent peace and tranquility in one of his final messages to the girl. This entry appeared to be a direct threat, suggesting that Dario may have used her before dealing with her. The forensic analysis findings were still waiting, but it appeared that the case could be taken to court based only on the diary entries because the physical evidence had vanished. Benary discovered that the evidence had just vanished as he attempted to determine the cause of the holdup. Neither the identity of the unusual metal object nor whether the toothpiece belonged to the missing girl could be ascertained by DNA analysis. The police officers in charge of protecting the evidence were promptly dismissed and placed under arrest for criminal negligence and potential aid to the suspects after the prosecutor made the decision to categorize information regarding the investigation's advancement. Following this heinous crime, federal authorities took immediate control of the investigation. Furthermore, it quickly became apparent that several of the documents discovered at the suspect's house had vanished as well. The final letter, in which he pledged to provide the girl eternal rest, was one of them. The case might just collapse in the absence of these pieces of evidence, and the offender and his associates might not be held accountable. 3 months later, however, no steps were taken to help identify the location of the missing physical evidence. Although the suspect's incarceration period had ended, it was dangerous and clearly threatened to result in a loss to take the case to court without important evidence. The child's phone data and the testimony of a random bystander who saw the suspect and the missing girl strolling together down the street on the day she vanished were all that was left. The court only partially approved the defense's request, which called for Dario's attorney to have the entire investigation ruled unlawful, his client released immediately, and the search results revoked because they were carried out without a special order. All of his relatives were freed because no particular charges could be brought against them, but the primary suspect was still in detention. But Dario was also freed in May 2019, 2 years after the girl vanished. The body had not been located, no new evidence had surfaced, and the investigation had not advanced during that time. The long-awaited trial and verdict, the investigation was still ongoing, even though the primary suspect was freed. Testimonies and other information occasionally surfaced that suggested Diana might still be alive. For example, a banknote purportedly written by the girl with a request for assistance was discovered. Only in June 2021, however, was it determined through handwriting analysis that the missing girl's writing was not hers. Prosecutor Benary was able to finally take this difficult case to trial, more than 4 years after the daughter vanished, but the Garnica family was growing more and more discouraged as the proceedings were continually postponed because of the global pandemic. The family no longer wished for a good result or the rightful punishment of the guilty. The offender didn't show up in court until April 2023, 6 years after the crime was committed, when the trial finally started. Everyone thought Dario's diaries were lost forever, but at that time the missing entries had been located. These turned out to be the main pieces of proof that established the man's guilt. Nevertheless, more professional examination was necessary to confirm these documents' legitimacy. Furthermore, 2 additional witnesses entered the case. One was the ex-lover of Dario, who said he had wooed her when she was just a teenager. She also said that she was by no means the only young girl the suspect had abused in this manner, and that he always had a weakness for them. The second witness was a likely collaborator and neighbor of Suarez Dario's brother. He claims that the brothers arrived together on a motorcycle with an odd big bundle in the sidecar the night the girl vanished, grabbed some equipment from a shed, and then departed together. Because Suarez was always erratic and violent, the witness had been silent for a long time out of concern that he may hurt his family. The defendant, who said he would never hurt the adjacent girl since he considered her to be his daughter, never acknowledged his wrongdoing. However, a guilty conviction was rendered based on the limited evidence. The missing girl's body was never located, and the events of that terrible day were meticulously reenacted. This proved that the man had seduced the adolescent, taken advantage of her, killed her, and disposed of her remains, likely with the assistance of his family. Dario was convicted of kidnapping and exploitation on May 2, 2023. He was given a life sentence without the chance of release for taking Diana's life. No other family members, including his brother Suarez, could be held responsible. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. On November 2, 1991, Victoria Ajo Clinton Climby was born in a small village in Côte d'Ivoire, a nation where family values were highly valued and sunshine warmed every part of the country. Despite the modest circumstances, she grew up in a loving and caring environment. A young woman with a good heart and lofty aspirations for her daughter, Victoria's mother did everything in her power to make sure her only child was safe and happy. Victoria was a lively, upbeat youngster with a keen mind and an infectious laugh. She was the life of the party among her friends and neighbors because of her kind smile and insatiable curiosity about the world. Victoria had an interest in learning from a young age. Notwithstanding her limited means, her mother made every effort to guarantee her daughter's access to an education. She frequently narrated to her daughter tales of large cities, with schools full of lovely books and vibrantly colored notebooks. Victoria's imagination was sparked by these tales, and she hoped to visit the world outside of her village someday. But village life was not without its challenges. Victoria's mother, the family's only provider, recognized that she would find it challenging to support her daughter alone after her father passed away. She continued to hold out hope that Victoria would eventually have a better future. That opportunity arose in 1999 when Marie-Therese Coau-Joyce, a London-based relative, offered to take Victoria in with her in order to give her a more comfortable life. Victoria's mother's older sister, Marie-Therese, appeared prepared to assume the responsibilities of guardian and mentor. She promised the family that the girl would have access to the greatest medical care, schools, and opportunities in the UK. The offer was a tough choice for Victoria's mother, in addition to being a chance for her daughter. She was concerned about letting her child go so far away, just like any other mother. But Marie-Therese managed to persuade her. Her voice was assured and comforting. She pledged to help Victoria reach her full potential and to treat her like her own daughter. Victoria's eyes glowed with delight when she heard about the move. The prospect of starting over in distant London filled her with pride. For an 8-year-old girl, seeing a world she had only ever imagined was a true adventure. During their farewell meetings, her friends and neighbors wished her luck and blessed her journey. Victoria left her hometown and started her journey in August 1999. With tears in her eyes, her mother watched the plane take off, hoping her little girl would be happy in her new life. She felt that this was the best course of action for her daughter. Bright lights, busy streets, and a strange cold met Victoria in London. For a girl accustomed to a hot tropical climate, it was an entirely different world. The speed of big city life, the shining storefronts, and the tall buildings delighted her. But that enthusiasm soon subsided as she started to get used to living with her aunt. From the moment Victoria arrived at Marie-Therese's house, she faced challenges she could not have predicted. She experienced alienation in place of the warmth and concern that had been promised. Strict rules that occasionally went beyond what was reasonable were imposed by Marie-Therese and her boyfriend Carl Manning. Victoria frequently experienced confusion and loneliness in her new home. According to neighbors, the girl initially appeared content and made an effort to interact with people. In an attempt to improve her communication skills, she studied English and even befriended some of the local kids. However, her joy gradually diminished. During this period, Marie-Thérèse's mother continued to communicate with her via telephone, but the discussions became increasingly brief, and Aunt Victoria's responses became increasingly vague. Her mother was starting to worry, but she was powerless because of the distance and lack of face-to-face interaction with her daughter. Victoria had dreamed of a bright new life, but now she was in a place where her dreams were slowly becoming hazy. She still maintained her optimism, though, that things might improve. The smile of a neighbor's child, a brilliant sunset outside her window, or the occasional kind smile from a bystander were all small pleasures to her. Warning signs started to emerge in the first few months of Victoria's life in London. Sadly, these signals were ignored. The energetic and curious girl who had traveled from Côte d'Ivoire started to change, according to the teachers at the school where Victoria was assigned. She was initially engaged in class, eager to learn as much as she could and making an effort to interact with her peers. But after a few months, she started acting very differently. Victoria's once bright and shining eyes seemed to wane. She became reclusive and she frequently appeared scared and cautious. Her body had marks that the teachers noticed. The girl started to sustain scratches, bruises, and other wounds. Victoria either remained silent or said she had fallen or bumped into something when asked where they came from. Although these justifications sounded unconvincing, the school regrettably took no decisive action. The odd injuries weren't reported to social services until much later. They limited their action to formal checks, though, and did not act quickly. The fact that Victoria frequently skipped classes was another concerning indicator. Marie-Thérèse, the girl's aunt, always claimed that the girl was ill or not feeling well when she was absent. Nobody, however, investigated the veracity of these claims. Teachers saw that Victoria's condition was worsening when she went back to school. Neighbors were also suspicious of Victoria's life at her aunt's house. They saw that the girl hardly ever left the house, and when she did, she appeared worn out and depressed. Some remembered Victoria crying on the landing from time to time. Once, a neighbor who was worried about the girl's health made an attempt to speak with Marie-Thérèse. The aunt reassured her, however, that the child was okay, stating that Victoria was simply very active and frequently fell. Questions were also raised by the noise coming from the apartment. Despite the noise and screams, no one in the neighborhood dared to openly step in. Only one man complained to the police, but they disregarded it because they believed it to be a family issue. Consequently, the alarms kept going off, but nobody did anything to stop it. Over the next few months, Victoria's health issues became more apparent. The girl had multiple hospital admissions. Injuries that appeared suspicious were noted by doctors. They included bruises and fractures, which Victoria's aunt said were caused by mishaps. Despite medical personnel's suspicions that the injuries might have been caused by violence, little was done about it. Marie-Thérèse was visited by social services, who consistently found her explanations to be persuasive. The aunt was skilled at projecting the image of a responsible and kind caregiver. She assured them that she loved Victoria and was trying her best to look after her, and she showed them a tidy apartment. Victoria stayed in the house each time, her life becoming more and more in danger, while the inspectors only made official findings. Victoria's condition had significantly worsened by the end of 1999. Her behavior became even more nervous, her clothes were no longer weather appropriate, and her weight drastically decreased. Teachers noticed that the girl's eyes appeared blank and that she frequently dozed off in class. The fact that Victoria started avoiding contact was another alarming sign. The girl recoiled and retreated when a teacher or a classmate attempted to assist her, such as by holding her hand or lifting her backpack. The school contacted social services once more because of this behavior, which raised serious concerns. But the tests were inconclusive this time as well. Victoria confided in one of the teachers one day that she was scared to leave for home. Once more, these words were ignored, despite being a desperate signal. Following a formal check at Marie-Thérèse's home, social services determined that the girl was in a safe environment. Victoria's condition had deteriorated to a critical level by early 2000. Teachers, neighbors, and even random bystanders noticed that the girl appeared malnourished, and that her movements were sluggish and unsure, but nobody could have predicted that tragedy would be the end of it all. Victoria's condition began to deteriorate significantly on February 24, 2000. Her aunt and boyfriend, Carl Manning, reported that the girl was not moving and was no longer breathing normally, so they called an ambulance. The child's condition shocked the medical staff when they arrived. Victoria was extremely malnourished, and her body was covered in burns and bruises, among other traumatizing marks. Victoria was taken to the hospital right away by the medical staff. The girl's body was too weak for the doctors to save her. Victoria died on February 25, 2000, the following day. In addition to physical abuse, her death was caused by total body exhaustion. According to the medical professionals who examined Victoria's body, prompt action could have prevented such horrible outcomes. They were astounded to see a child in such critical condition while under the care of the school and social services. Victoria's death shocked everyone in the UK, not just her loved ones. People found it incomprehensible that a child with such obvious suffering had gone unprotected. This case came to represent structural issues with the way the police, social services, and medical fields operate. The police opened an investigation as soon as Victoria Climie passed away. Her multiple injuries, critical exhaustion, and hospitalization circumstances sparked serious suspicions among doctors, who promptly informed law enforcement. Detectives concentrated on obtaining all available evidence after realizing they were dealing with a tragedy that could have been avoided. Finding out what transpired behind the closed doors of Victoria's home and prosecuting those responsible were their two main objectives. The investigators immediately proceeded to the apartment where Victoria had resided with her aunt, Marie-Therese Kouao-Joyce, and her boyfriend, Carl Manning, after securing a search warrant. The apartment appeared to be fairly typical at first glance, with a tidy interior, spotlessly clean surfaces, and fresh flowers on a little table in the living room. However, the seasoned investigators saw right away that the house appeared to have been specially prepared for their arrival. Everything appeared overly sterile, as though the proprietors were attempting to project an illusion of well-being. Their first observation was of Victoria's bedroom. It was a stark contrast to the other rooms. The girl's room literally screamed coldness and neglect, while the living room could be described as comfortable and well-kept. A teenager's room didn't even have the slightest hint of a childlike atmosphere. There were no toys, books, or vibrantly colored furniture in place of empty walls that were unadorned and uncozy. There was only a thin, tattered blanket on the bed, obviously unfit for the winter. There were absolutely no pillows. The room's sparse furniture had a worn-out, scratched appearance. Victoria's clothing, shoes, and school supplies were all in bad shape. It appeared as though no one had updated her closet in a while, because the majority of the items were either too small or badly worn. People were especially interested in the girl's shoes. Since they were light summer shoes, they were totally inappropriate for the severe winter weather. For the investigators, this was a warning sign. There was obviously a problem. The atmosphere in the room was one of neglect, if not apathy, rather than concern and care for the child. The signs of violence that the experts discovered upon closer examination, however, were the most terrifying finding. At first glance, the stains on the walls and furniture looked like filthy streaks, but the experts soon concluded that these were blood traces, partially obscured but discernible to the trained eye. Although the room's floor appeared to be clean, there were still questionable stains on it, which later proved to be attempts to conceal something awful. A tiny plastic container was standing in one corner of the room. The investigators discovered an even more sinister image when they opened it. There were broken toys inside. The only things that truly belonged to Victoria, it seemed, were these. They appeared to have been purposefully broken to prevent the girl from playing with them, or thrown there to get rid of them. The overall impression that the child was being treated like an unnecessary burden was only strengthened by this. There were also indications of neglect in the kitchen. There was almost nothing in the refrigerator. There was a juice box, a stale piece of bread, and a few cans of canned food. Marie-Therese had previously stated that she had always provided for Victoria's nutritional needs, which contrasted sharply with this limited food supply. Investigators questioned how the girl ate, given the scarcity of food in the home, or was it more likely that she was just not eating enough? When the detectives discovered multiple locked cabinets, the situation became even more concerning. Marie-Therese responded to the request to open them with blatant hostility, and made an effort to avoid doing so by claiming private reasons. She only grudgingly gave up the keys after protracted discussions, and when she was threatened with having the entire cabinet seized. Everyone in the room was shocked by what they saw when the doors opened. Belts, wires, and wooden sticks were among the objects in the cabinets that were obviously intended for physical abuse or punishment. The wires were coiled into tight loops, and one belt featured a metal buckle. These results, which presented a horrifying image of the potential abuse Victoria endured, spoke for themselves. Each of these objects was captured on camera, meticulously recorded, and confiscated for additional analysis. The investigators knew that every little detail from these findings could be important in revealing what was happening behind that tidy but dishonest facade. The state of Victoria's room revealed much more than the apartment's adult residents were willing to acknowledge. After compiling all the evidence, the investigators started to depict the girl's life as one of hardship, suffering, and possibly cruelty. Investigators were immediately struck by Marie-Therese Joyce and Carl Manning's behavior when they were called in by the police for their initial interrogation. Despite their caution, they made an effort to project confidence. Although Marie-Therese appeared nervous, her responses sounded practiced, as though she had readied herself for potential queries beforehand. She started to maintain her innocence right away, saying she loved Victoria and tried her hardest to look after the girl. Victoria was a difficult child, the woman said. Despite her temper, Marie-Therese characterized Victoria as a mischievous child who was allegedly prone to accidents. She was constantly sick, she didn't do well in school, and she and I always had difficulties, but I did everything I could to help her. I tried to be a good aunt to her. She claimed that the girl's clumsiness was the cause of the bruises and injuries on her body. The reason for her emaciation, according to Marie-Therese, was solely her lack of appetite. She was always falling, hitting the corners of furniture. She just always had some kind of trouble. And of course, she never listened. We offered her food, but she hardly ate anything. Conversely, Carl Manning made an effort to portray himself as an unconcerned bystander. He tried to downplay his involvement in Victoria's life. In his own words, "I had virtually no contact with her." As the interrogation went on, the investigators noticed inconsistencies in their accounts. "She was just Marie-Therese's niece to me, and I never really got involved with the child. My business was work and my own affairs. I saw her rarely and didn't notice anything strange." For instance, Marie-Therese claimed that Victoria had unintentionally spilled a kettle of boiling water on herself when questioned about the cause of the burns on her body. Carl, however, asserted that he had never witnessed any burns and that nothing of the sort had occurred. When the conversation shifted to the girl's personal items discovered in her room, both of them made a hasty attempt to change the topic, which was even more suspicious. Marie-Therese asserted that because they had little, Victoria had saved money by amassing a collection of old and worn-out items. The careful investigators did not overlook these contradictions, however, as Carl stated that he had no idea what Victoria's possessions were and added, "I'm not interested." It was always Marie-Therese's responsibility. The police chose to intensify the interrogations. After meticulously documenting the testimony, it was clear that neither of them was telling the whole truth, and more research was necessary to determine the true events that had occurred in this family. In order to get more candid responses from Marie-Therese Joyce and Carl Manning during the second round of questioning, the police started using the evidence gathered in the apartment. In addition to providing an expert report that unequivocally stated that the girl's burns could not have been caused by unintentional contact with hot water, the investigators displayed photos of the bloodstains discovered on Victoria's room's walls and furniture. The suspects' responses only served to heighten suspicion of their guilt because this evidence was indisputable. The situation became even more muddled with each of their new responses. Investigators started posing direct queries, such as, what caused the bloodstains on the furniture and walls? Why hadn't anyone gotten help if Victoria had actually just fallen? If the wounds were that bad? Marie-Therese was unable to provide a definitive response to these questions, either stating that she didn't think it was serious or citing memory problems. The facts put pressure on Carl Manning, who had previously claimed to have little to do with Victoria during the initial interrogation. He became irate after seeing the pictures and reading the experts' conclusions. He initially denied any involvement in the events, but he changed his strategy when faced with indisputable proof. The investigators were baffled by his justifications. "I knew what was going on," he acknowledged after a protracted silence. "But I didn't get involved. It's none of my business. She's not my child. I thought it was Marie-Therese's problem and let her deal with it herself." They emphasized that he was obviously a witness to what was taking place, even though he claimed not to be involved. Although Carl acknowledged that he had noticed the girl's body was bruised and injured, he added that he had no justification for getting involved. Under the weight of indisputable evidence, Marie-Therese eventually acknowledged during one of the interrogations that she occasionally lost her temper and turned to physical punishment. She told investigators that these were common ways of raising children, that they were accepted in her culture, and that she didn't see anything wrong with them. "Children need discipline sometimes," she said. Investigators discovered, however, that beneath those words was a harsh reality. "I used the belt to show them what is right and wrong. It's not violence, it's education." Examining the belts in the locked closet revealed marks that might suggest they were used repeatedly for striking. Furthermore, Victoria's cuts, bruises, and burns showed that the penalties were far more severe than what could be referred to as discipline. Marie-Thérèse, Joao Joyce, and Carl Manning were arrested by the police on the basis of the evidence they had gathered, which included witness statements, forensic tests, and the suspect's own confessions. They were accused of abusing children and killing Victoria. Investigators worked diligently to piece together a horrifying account of the girl's life, filled with cruelty and suffering, which led to these charges. During her arrest, Marie-Thérèse made an effort to defend herself by stating repeatedly that she did everything in her power and never intended to hurt Victoria. Investigators interpreted her trembling voice as fear of punishment rather than sincere regret. She persisted in asserting that her parenting techniques were required because Victoria was a challenging child. But in light of the overwhelming amount of evidence discovered during the investigation, these justifications began to seem less and less credible. The way Carl Manning acted was different. He said nothing and made no direct effort to defend his behavior, but his actions showed that he wanted to completely shift the blame to Marie-Therese and absolve himself of it. The investigators were convinced that he was an accomplice, even though he did not start the violence because of his unwillingness to step in and his claims of fear of conflict. Investigators stressed that Victoria's death was the result of a protracted cycle of violence that was evident to those in her immediate vicinity and that, with greater resolve, could have been prevented. Both the girl's death and the inaction of those who could have stopped it were tragic aspects of this tale. When Victoria Climie's trial started in January 2001, it quickly rose to the top of the UK's discussion list. The horrific details surrounding the 8-year-old girl's death exposed the inadequacies of the social protection system, which had failed to stop the tragedy, as well as the brutality of her guardians. In addition to proving the accused's guilt, the prosecutor's office had to explain to the court the full scope of Victoria's suffering, which was a challenging task. Victoria's aunt and her partner, the primary defendants, were put on trial for alleged child abuse and murder. Victoria had been subjected to months of systematic physical and psychological abuse, according to the prosecution. A forensic medical report, witness statements, and photos of the girl's injuries were among the evidence they presented from the investigation. A medical report that verified Victoria's injuries could not have been accidental was crucial to the prosecution's case. In addition to using violence, the prosecution contended that Marie-Therese and Carl purposefully denied the girl access to food, shelter, and medical attention. She died as a result of hypothermia and exhaustion. Marie-Therese maintained that she didn't intend to hurt the child and that her actions were educational. She was under the strain of life circumstances, according to her defense, and was unaware of the seriousness of the consequences of her actions. Carl, for his part, said he was just watching from the sidelines and never held out his hand to Victoria, denying any active participation. Prosecutors, however, provided proof that he was aware of the abuse and took part in it. The attorneys for the defendants made an effort to frame the case differently. They maintained that Marie-Therese's ignorance of her responsibilities as a guardian was the reason behind Victoria's tragic accident death. Although the girl's aunt had acted improperly, the defense maintained that her actions were unintentional. Carl Manning maintained that he only shared a home with Marie-Therese and the girl and had no involvement in Victoria's upbringing. He persisted in maintaining that his partner was the only one with knowledge of what transpired behind closed doors, but the defense was unable to persuade the judge that the defendant's acts were impulsive or poorly thought out. The prosecution provided indisputable proof that Victoria had endured unjustified, systematic abuse and deprivation. Strong emotions were present during the hearings. As she heard the horrific details of what her daughter had gone through, Victoria's mother, who was present in the courtroom, was unable to contain her tears. The trial was extensively covered by the media, which infuriated the public and led to criticism of the social safety net. The jury returned a verdict on January 12, 2001, following weeks of hearings. Carl Manning and Marie-Therese Kouajoyce were convicted of Victoria Kleinham's murder. The judge stressed that they had intentionally caused the child to suffer and said their actions were cruel and premeditated. Marie-Therese Kouajoyce received a life sentence without the possibility of release. Carl Manning was given a life sentence with at least 20 years to serve after the court found him guilty of murder and complicity in child abuse. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.